This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Evan Jensen. This show is live and broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. Don't forget now, between 9 and 12 every weekday morning, we're live on YouTube as well. So you can watch us live there in your office if that's what you like. You can also watch back later on demand on the same YouTube channel. Busy news day ahead of us. Obviously standing by to give us a quick update. But before we go to Elvis, let's find out from Anine what is trending this morning, what people are talking about.
Well, good morning, Evan. Actually, breaking news on Twitter this morning, and that's that SAB Miller and AB InBev have, in principle, reached an agreement. Also, Twitter has been outraged by the fact that Cecil the Lion's killer will not be facing any charges. We talk a bit more about that later.
In your news, Eben, we'll be taking a look at President Jacob Zuma, who's called for more black industrialists. There's a heat wave in southern Africa, and we'll be looking at some of the devastation caused in Limpopo with some of the fires there as well. And our very own CEO, of course, in court today.
Yeah, it's an interesting case, but temperatures soaring all over the SADC countries, really above 40 degrees Celsius, causing lots of problems for farmers and, of course, fires all over the place. But a man who's always super hot is Kendall Makamate. What's happening on the sports desk?
Thank you very much, Evan. Bafana will be playing their last match in the Central American Tour, 2 a.m. South African time. And the match-fixing scandal featuring New Zealand, or at least former New Zealand cricket players, is back in court in London. But more about all of that and more in the Sports Bulletin.
Right now, let's take a look at all your headlines. President Jacob Zuma has called for more black industrialists to boost the country's economy. The High Court in Cape Town will today hear arguments in the DA's review application to have the SABC Chief Operating Officer Hlaudi Motsoeneng's permanent appointment set aside. And several southern African countries are experiencing extreme heat waves with temperatures reaching over 40 degrees Celsius. But before we get into your news, let's hook up with Kendall Makamate, who will tell you more about your sports news. Morning, Kendall.
Good morning, Elvis. Thank you very much, and good morning to you at home. Coming up in sports today, just a quick recap, is Bafana finished their Central American tour with a match against Honduras tonight, hoping to emulate their heroics against Costa Rica, where they won by a single goal to nil. And then, as you heard a little earlier, the match-fixing trial of former Black Cap captain Chris Keynes continues in London with testimony from former teammates. That's a quick, in a nutshell, what's happening at the sports, so make sure you stick around. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall Nuts. Let's now take a look at your top story this hour. President Jacob Zuma says that South Africa needs to produce more black industrialists to boost the country's economy. Now, he urged business people not to focus solely on trading in shares. President Zuma was speaking at the 20th anniversary of the Community Investment Ventures Holdings, a black-owned company which focuses on telecommunications, power and information technology sectors, when he spoke last night in Sandton. The president applauded the company for its fearlessness.
Will never prosper if the majority of the people are not part of the mainstream of the economy. Because it is quite a unique thing, perhaps only South Africa, that we have such a situation where the majority are poor and are not part of the economy. We have opened up a sector that has never been used seriously. The ocean economy. The opportunities are beyond any imagination.
The High Court in Cape Town will today hear arguments in the DA's review application to have SABC Chief Operating Officer Hlaudi Motsoeneng's permanent appointment set aside. Now, this is what is called Part B of the party's court bid. In its court application, the DA refers to the public protector's findings that Motsoeneng lied about having a matric certificate, purged staff who were not loyal to him, and allegedly inflated his salary. Motsoeneng, the SABC and Communications Minister Faith Mutambi lost their appeal in the Supreme Court in Bloemfontein last week. They were challenging whether Madonsela's remedial action was binding. This comes after Madonsela recommended that the SABC should institute disciplinary proceedings against Motsoeneng. But the SABC is now challenging the Supreme Court of Appeal's ruling in the Constitutional Court. Abatembu King Bulekaya Dalindyebo is expected to appear in the Mthatha High Court in the Eastern Cape today for the extension of his bail. Now this as he intends approaching the Constitutional Court after his appeal was refused by the Supreme Court of Appeal last week. He faces a jail sentence for various crimes committed in the 1990s. Dalindyebo believes that customary laws should have been taken into consideration as it is entrenched in the South African Constitution. Today, his legal team is expected to try to convince the judge and provide valid reasons as to why his bail should be extended. He has notified the court of his intention to approach the highest court in the land over his conviction and sentence. He wants the Constitutional Court to clarify why Roman Dutch law and English common law dominate the South African legal system. He argues that if indigenous legal system was not undermined, he wouldn't have been convicted. South Africa is not alone in enduring the current heat wave. Several southern African countries also experiencing extreme temperatures. The mercury soared in Zimbabwe, peaking at 41 degrees Celsius in some parts.
Cooling off from the unbearable heat as the hot weather in South Africa slowly drifts north.
It's too much. Compared with the previous years, there's a difference.
On the bright side, the heat has tripled business for street vendors illegally selling water along busy intersections.
Nowadays it seems it's better than last time. Yes. But only the problem with us is only council. We have a problem with the council.
Zimbabwe's Met Department has been monitoring the soaring temperature. It concedes it's very hot, but says the temperatures don't yet qualify as a heat wave. Harare peaked at 33 degrees over the weekend, but would need to reach 34 degrees to be considered excessive.
We've seen temperatures being in the higher range over the past few days, going up to 41 degrees Celsius over the Limpopo Valley, also 40 degrees Celsius over the Zambezi Valley. But at this time of the year, these temperatures are quite normal. They are high temperatures, but when they are continuously high for some period of time, they tend to have a negative effect on people. Therefore, the temperatures are with us. This is normal for this time of October. No records have been broken as yet.
Violent thunderstorms are expected over the next few days, and they will bring some respite, but temperatures will rise again.
But they tend to be generally high, that is in the upper 30s for most of the time.
The news, little relief for Zimbabweans. The Met Department has predicted a late start to the rainy season, which could also be a potential blow to the agricultural-based economy. Shinga Nyoka, SABC News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Botswana will use some of its $8.5 billion in foreign exchange reserves to stimulate the economy. Now this after a drop in diamond prices hit growth in the world's biggest producer. Last month, the Southern African country slashed its 2015 growth forecast from 4.9% to 2.6% and said that the country would post a budget deficit this year and next year.
Diamonds account for around 75% of Botswana's foreign exchange earnings and 30% of GDP. Now the country is planning to diversify from diamonds as global prices of the precious stones dropped on low demand and is affecting the economy. The value of rough diamond exports from Botswana's mines fell 15% in the first 6 months of the year. Botswana's President Ian Khama says they realize the economy is stagnant and the time has come for them to make bold decisions and implement new projects that will boost the economy. But that doesn't mean they're going to be reckless. The economic stimulus, which Khama said will be ready in a few weeks, will target tourism development, agricultural production, construction and manufacturing. Botswana currently has $8.5 billion in foreign currency reserves, with around half held in sovereign wealth fund.
Well, that's your news for now. Eben Janssen is standing by to delve deeper into some of the stories making headlines with in-depth interviews. It's over to you, Eben.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elvis. Elvis, of course, will be back a little bit later, top of the hour, with an updated news update. Now, South Africa's tax ombudsman Judge Bernard Makgabo Ngwepe will today release his first annual report. The Office of the Ombudsman was set up to review and address tax disputes arising between taxpayers and the South African Revenue Services, SARS. Judge Ngwepe was appointed in 2013 as the first tax ombudsman by the then Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan. Ngwepe reports directly to the Minister and works closely with, but independently of, SARS. Now, Judge Ngwepe joins us from our studios in the capital, Pretoria, this morning. Very good morning to you, Judge Ngwepe. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you and good morning to your listeners.
Judge, without divulging any of the real details of your first reports, what can South African taxpayers expect from your first report as Ombudsman?
Well, firstly, just a slight correction. The report is not being released today for the first time. It has, in fact, already been submitted to Parliament. What is going to happen today is just some kind of a post-mortem of the report itself, a discussion of the report itself. In the report, what people can generally expect would be some of the challenges that were faced by the office, which is a new office, in fact. It's only 2 years old. They'll read about the challenges that we faced in setting up the office, but they'll also read the good news about the services that this office has so far been offering to people who came into our offices or sent emails about the complaints or difficulties that they had in connection with their tax affairs. They will also learn about a variety of type of problems and challenges that these people encountered and the role that this office played in collaboration with SARS in trying to resolve, as far as possible, a number of these challenges.
Do you believe your office is there as a mechanism to deal with disputes only, or what do you see as the wider role and function, really, of the Ombudsman?
The wider function of the Ombudsman is to facilitate, as it were, tax collection in the sense of ensuring that the relationship between the tax collector on the one hand and the taxpayer is as smooth as possible to facilitate tax payment by the taxpayers. We are trying to iron out any difficulties that may arise between these two stakeholders. And by so doing, we hope to facilitate cooperation and compliance on the part of taxpayers.
I want to talk about one of the findings that I see there, that more than 75% of complaints lodged by taxpayers to your office against SARS were resolved in favor of taxpayers. What's the thing that we learned from that?
Well, what we can learn from that is that no matter how efficient our machineries, such as SARS, may be, time and again there will be some challenges which need to be dealt with. There is always room for improvement. And may I say, while you speak about this 25%, it's not as if some of these problems were of some earth-shattering importance. They vary in terms of severity, some more serious than others. So one shouldn't be alarmed at looking the figure and think that there were huge, huge problems. A number of them were actually minor and easy to resolve.
And what's your message then, as the tax ombudsman, to the public out there today?
My message to the public out there is that if you are legitimately indebted to SARS, please pay your dues, because firstly, it's wrong not to pay tax when you've got to. And secondly, there may be serious consequences for failure to pay what is legitimately owed to SARS. You can think, for example, in terms of punitive interest that will follow if you don't pay in time. So that is the message to them. But also, of course, generally speaking, not only the taxpayers, but the government and everybody else, we need to make sure that we use this tax, which people have paid, in a wise manner, in a manner that will benefit everybody, but not in a corruptive manner which will benefit only a few, or in a manner that will promote distrust and lack of faith in the system.
How do you see us growing the tax base even further here in South Africa to meet the demands of that government has to meet the variety of challenges that we have in our society?
Of course, first we should call upon those who have got to pay tax to do so as far as possible on their own. And secondly, of course, we have got to sharpen even further our tax collection machinery, which is quite good and compares among the best. But the one thing that I think we need to do is to keep a sharp eye on multinational corporations and make sure that they don't ship out monies out of the country, which should in fact have been part of legitimate tax. You have read about these things in the newspapers, and I can assure you that it is not a small matter. I can assure you that it is large sums of monies that are being siphoned out of the country.
In conclusion, what do you say is the single most important thing that you've managed to achieve in your short time you've been in the office thus far?
I think we have managed to win the confidence of the public, to believe that this office can help. But above all, we have, I believe, managed to smoothen the relationship between the taxpayer on the one end and SARS. And to that end, we believe that we have facilitated tax collection.
Judge Zuma, thank you very much for joining us today, coming to you live out of the capital here in South Africa. That is Judge Bernard Makgabo Ngwepe, who is also the tax ombudsman here in South Africa. We talk about the role of the tax ombudsman and then the challenges that taxpayers face in general, that the office of the tax ombudsman faces as well. Now we shift our focus rather to the Northern Cape. Judge Matebe Patswane is expected to start delivering her judgment shortly in the case involving Northern Cape ANC chairperson John Block, Deputy Secretary Alvin Burtis and Trifecta Director Christo Skoltz. The judgment, originally set for delivery in June of this year, was postponed because Judge Patswane was not ready. The accused have all pleaded not guilty to the charges of fraud, corruption and multi-million rand government lease tenders. For the latest on the trial, let's go outside the Northern Cape High Court in Kimberley, where our reporter Puleng Mudupe is standing by. A very good morning to you, Puleng.
Good morning, Eben.
Puleng, just paint us the picture today. What's the expectation from court?
Well, it is expected that judgment will be handed down in just over 30 minutes when court is expected to start. The case dates back to a few years. It emerged in court that between the year 2006 and 2009, Yolanda Buota, the late Yolanda Buota, who was by then the HOD of Social Development Department, awarded tenders to trifecta companies, and the tenders were inflated. And now both Block and Alvin Buotas, who are co-accused in the case, they also benefited kickbacks out of that. But now they are arguing that they did not benefit as such, as they were not yet officials in the government. They were consultants in the company. So we are expected to hear today a judgment in that case.
Just quickly, the delays in this case. It's been dragging on now for more than 3 years. Why have there been these delays, and do you expect matters to proceed quickly now?
Well, there have been a couple of issues that caused the delay. Firstly, the late Yolanda Buota became sick. She suffered of cancer and she became sick and she died. And while she was sick at the moment, her lawyers pleaded with the courts that they should postpone the case so that they could award her the chance to get well. And there were also some other issues in terms of the defense applying with the court stating that Judge Matebe Patswane had to step down since she was biased in the case. And Judge Matebe Patswane, she made a statement in court saying that she is not biased and she feels that she can continue with the case.
No, this has been a highly politicized case involving the ANC chairperson, John Block, there in the Northern Cape. What are the opposition parties saying now that judgment is due to be delivered?
The opposition parties, they have been vocal in the matter. They have been, in fact, calling for both Elvan Botha and John Block to step down, as they are both MECs within the government. John Block is the MEC of Finance in the province, and Elvan Botha is the MEC of local government. They feel that since they are handling public money, they are working with public money, and they are facing such charges, they should not be allowed to handle public funds. And now they are calling for them to step down. But the ANC have been in full support of both Block and Botha, saying that they will only be able to answer on the matter once the courts have found them guilty.
This judgment has started. Has Judge Matebe Patswane started delivering the judgment there?
Not yet. Court is scheduled to start within 30 minutes, and the judge has indicated that it might not end today, so court might continue for the next day as well.
Puleng, thank you very much for that update. That is Puleng Madupe coming to you from the High Court, Northern Cape High Court, the court that is in Kimberley. She'll keep us updated for the rest of the day throughout all of our updates as to what is happening in that, well, much anticipated, I can tell you, and long-awaited judgment in the trial of Northern Cape ANC chairperson John Block and of course, Deputy Secretary Alvin Burtis, and then the Trifecta Director Christo Skos is also implicated in the matter. We'll tell you how that develops a little bit later. Of course, time for us now to have a look at what's happening in social media. And a sensational development this morning, I can tell you. Anini standing by to give us a little bit more detail on that. But 1.4 trillion South African rand, yes. That's about the same size as the nation's budget.
Well, Evan, it's definitely a lot of money that we're talking about here. And in principle, like I said a bit earlier, this agreement has been reached between SAB Miller and AB InBev. Evan, I'm not the expert on this, but I can tell you we are talking a lot of money. And I actually saw someone tweeting that this now means that 1 in 3 beers that you drink will now be produced by one single company.
That's all beers in the world?
All beers in the world,
All beers in the world. Well, you know, as you get older, you develop more of a taste for beer as a man, I suppose. And that is a scary fact. Let's hope that all the beers don't taste the same after a while now. But there's this burgeoning craft breweries all over the place. That's changing a game somewhat. I don't know why we need to consolidate all the beer makers. Maybe a little bit later in the show we can speak to an expert to tell us what this deal means, or maybe even later in the week. But that's the one thing. What else is happening, Anine?
Well, a bit earlier this morning, Evan, we saw Wits fees trending. That's mainly because the SLC, I think they're kind of like promoting their march that's taking place tomorrow. They're saying that the increase in fees for 2016, they're very upset about it. They're saying that this is excluding poor students to go to the university. We can see over there, this is the poster that they've been tweeting, 14 October. March. Tomorrow midday, that's when the march will be held. And they're just basically saying that even though we continue seeing these fees go up, NFSAS isn't providing, they're not staying up to date with like increasing their funding for students. So maybe that's something we can get NFSAS in on to talk a bit more about. Yeah,
absolutely. I think we should do that a little bit later. There's a lot of unhappiness, not just at this university, but all around the country, around fees. Government have put together a task team to deal with it. We should really get on top of that. But Cecil the Lion is not going quietly. I can see there's another uproar around Cecil the Lion. Hashtag Cecil the Lion if you are on social media right now. But the killer of the lion won't be charged in Zimbabwe.
No charges at all because, Eben, they do say that he had obtained all legal authority to conduct a hunt. Now, we knew this from the beginning, but of course, animal activists, they're very upset about this. They want him to at least kind of take some accountability for killing Zimbabwe's most famous lion. But that is the hashtag going around. We've actually got some very nice pictures that we got from social media because this news broke yesterday afternoon, and this is what people have been tweeting.
There's a meme from Leslie Young. Says his name was Cecil. He never bothered anybody. don't know about that, to be quite honest. Justice for Cecil is another meme. Beautiful pictures. Ronnie.
No justice, actually, yes.
Does that mean no justice?
Yes, because there's a pass-through.
Okay, well, I don't read the new
and
language
actually,
very
people
well.
taking this it's very close to the heart. You have an artwork for Cecil the Lion being shared on social media.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. That one from Carrie Rose. I may have avoided jail time, but my life will always be a prison. That, of course, is the dentist, the American dentist, in picture there, who shot Cecil the Lion. His name is Walter Palmer. And Maya Limon asked for a ban on trophy and canned hunting. Yeah, very much in the news. Before you go, and there are two other stories that's very topical right now. The King, of course, got a bail extension hearing today, and then, from what I see, is we found MH17. Is that right?
Well, the report today in the Netherlands is going to be presented, Eben, to take a look at how the plane went down. We're not saying it's not going to look at who's responsible, but how the plane has gone down. So that's definitely something to look out for on Twitter, #MH17.
Well, Anine, thank you very much. Anine Dorma will be back a little bit later with us to give us another update. But we move on, as we always do. Around 200 AMCU members have downed tools demanding higher wages at Dalmas Coal, a small operation that's east of Johannesburg here. This follows an outcome of yesterday's mass meeting at Sibanye Gold's Driefontein mine, where thousands voted by show of hands in favour of a strike for higher wages. Last year, AMCU led a 5-month-long strike in the platinum sector, demanding 12,500 rands. Caused a whole lot of consternation here in South Africa. Let's have a look at some of the tweets that's been coming in on this. Of course, AMCU is going to strike, says Swazi, stating the obvious there for us. Thank you, Swazi. Is that Kies Bruggemans? He says, AMCU voted for a gold mining strike. That was predictable. Now, when will it start? For how long will it last? And who will be bankrupted? Ask Kies. There you have Jen Visick Infomac. Says, South Africa Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union, AMCU, voted overwhelmingly for a strike in the gold mining sector. Then, Just Don says, I think we are in for a massive AMCU strike come 2016. It could be longer than the platinum strike. Talking about gold wages, and that would be devastating if that would be the case. Now, let's move on and take a look at our picture of the day now. This one comes from Greg Sherrow, and it's captioned, "No charges for Cecil the Lion's killer." #Cecil. As you can see, these memes, there's the picture. These memes have been doing the round all over. A lot of people love Cecil the Lion. Now, front pages from around the globe. What's happening elsewhere? We start in Europe. The Times reports that gun permit applications are soaring as Israelis arm themselves amid the Palestinian unrest that has claimed 21 lives now. That's in the last month, and injured some 1,300 people. Then we move to the USA, where the International New York Times says Moscow is behind more than 60 strikes a day, according to Russian state news media. And rebels are firing more American anti-tank weapons, deepening the impression of a proxy war. Finally, in China, the South China Morning Post. Regional warming in East Asia over the past 30 years has led to a rapid rise in surface ozone pollution that may have led to thousands of premature deaths a year in that country. That's according to a Chinese university study. Let's pull it back here to South Africa. What's happening in the country today, here in Johannesburg, where the silicosis case is expected to continue in the High Court. The lawyers representing 56 former mine workers who contracted silicosis say they want all miners who have worked in the gold mining sector, as well as the families of those who've died of TB or silicosis, to be rightfully compensated. Then, in Kimberley, where judgment is, of course, is expected in the trifecta case against ANC Chair John Block, MEC for Cooperative Government and Governance and Traditional Affairs, as well as Human Settlements, Alvin Boertes, including Trifecta Director Christos Stoltz. The men are accused of multi-million rands worth of fraud and corruption charges related to government leases. Then we go down to the Western Cape. The bid to have the appointment of Claudio Mutsuneng as the SABC COO set aside will be heard in the High Court. Public Protector Tuli Madonsela found that Mutsuneng lied about having a matric certificate and that his appointment as acting COO and his salary hike from 1.5 to 2.4 million in 1 year were irregular. Time for us to take a short break. You're watching Newsroom right here on SABC News.
What is beauty? Is it a view that's been waiting for you for centuries? A setting that gives you goosebumps when you see it for the first time? Is it a moment that stops you in your tracks and leaves you in awe? Some people spend their whole lives looking for it. When you open yourself up to it, suddenly you find yourself in a place where true beauty isn't something you'll ever see. Because when you meet South Africa, you'll reconsider what you think you know.
Welcome back. The ANC's National General Council has come and gone now, but now the ruling party might soon have to deal with a robust campaign against its plans to make use of nuclear energy. Greenpeace here in South Africa has warned the ANC that it will take action against its plans to make use of nuclear power that could be used to help with the country's energy challenges. The Energy Department has already signed agreements with several countries as part of its nuclear build program to build 9,600 megawatts of nuclear capacity by 2030. But here to tell us why this deal isn't an ideal solution to our energy woes, well, we are joined by Greenpeace's Africa Executive Director, Michael O'Brien Onyeka. Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
This weekend past, we saw the ruling party's National General Council. Yeah. The issue of nuclear energy was not so much a point of discussion. Were you surprised by this?
Not so much, because we've had some engagement, in-depth meeting with ANC Economic Transformative Committee, and where we presented the logic, not just the ideal or idealism, but real bread and butter analysis of nuclear versus renewable. And I think there are still some very good people within the ANC that are listening to rational thinking rather than trying to look at the vested interests of a few business folks who are pushing the nuclear angle. So we weren't very surprised that it didn't come up so much.
What is your view with regards to nuclear energy? Too dangerous or too expensive, or both?
Both. You see, the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that South Africa has an urgent energy imperative, an energy need. Now, assuming you sign a nuclear deal tomorrow, the first watt of energy that will come out of that reactor will be in 10 to 15 years. Yeah. Now, South Africans don't want to wait for 10 to 15 years for electricity. They want electricity now. And we are saying the quick solution and a long-lasting sustainable solution is to invest massively in a good mix of renewables, wind and solar and other renewable sector that is fairly cheap to do, that comes on time and on budget, rather than on nuclear that on average will go 90% over budget and takes 10 to 15 years to build, plus the environmental hazards that it creates.
Talk about the environmental hazards. Here in South Africa, we have run a nuclear plant without incident for the last 30 years or so. Doesn't that give us a little bit of track record and a foothold maybe to balance the nuclear energy need, for that matter, with renewable energy?
You see, if there were no other viable alternatives, we would totally support the nuclear angle as a transition to a zero-carbon energy economy or energy industry. However, the fact that you haven't had problems at Quebec does not exclude that problem. That is why in the nuclear industry, that is something called liability insurance cover in case a Fukushima happens. At the moment, the South African liability cover for nuclear accident is 2 billion rand. We have seen from Fukushima that the Japanese government has spent over 600 billion rands and rising. So we say the nuclear energy pathway is too expensive, too little, too late to plug the energy gap because it comes in 15 years and you lock yourself to 40 to 60 years cycle on an outdated energy technology that is being replaced around the world by a good mix of renewables. Like Germany used to have nuclear power stations, switching them off, heavy industry country, cold country for that matter, and is now generating more than 50% of its energy from a mix of renewables, wind and solar. What reason do we have not to do that in a country that has the best radiation when it comes to solar energy, for example?
Third best in the world, apparently.
It doesn't really matter whether it's the first or the third. Actually, it was ranked by the IHS as the most desirable location for investment in renewable. Why are we not doing it?
If South Africa decides to go ahead with a plan to use nuclear energy, what's the type of resistance that we're going to see from Greenpeace? Are you going to be painting these facilities? Are you going to be having roadblocks? What's this rolling mass action that Greenpeace is planning?
We have over 40 years of experience in this David and Goliath battle. And we will use a wide mix of actions, but also legal, because we believe that no nuclear plants, new nuclear plants in South Africa will pass either an environmental impact assessment or a socio-economic impact assessment. Therefore, we will fight it through the courts. We will mobilize critical mass around the country against it and raise political actions also against it. So it will be a wide mix of actions. And we've made this clear to the ANC Economic Committee that nuclear is a Trojan horse for South Africa. It's too expensive, it will bring too little relief and too late. And there is no rational reason for going the nuclear pathway except to serve the interests of struggling nuclear industries in Europe that are running out of customers and are peddling their wares in Africa where they are offering buy one, get one free, but still at a very high cost for us, when there are viable, cheaper alternatives like renewables.
Thank you for joining us. Very, very strong words this morning by Greenpeace's African Executive Director, Michael O'Brien-Onyeka. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This morning. Now, we move on. Dark clouds has rocked yet another sporting fraternity, this time cricket. As the former New Zealand cricketer Lou Vincent told a London courtroom yesterday that he had helped to fix matches under strict orders from his captain, Chris Cairns, while they were playing for the Chandigarh Lions in the Indian Cricket League in 2008. Chris Cairns was said to be the mastermind in the independent league. Comments have been varied throughout social media. Shreya says if matches are fixed, then aren't we wasting our time and money recklessly? Shreya, yes, that would be accurate. Adnan Siddiqui says fresh match-fixing scandal associating a Kiwi great, Chris Cairns, and Lou Vincent platitudinal scam for this era of cricket. Mahmoud Mirza says big thanks to the Kiwis for providing all the match-fixing headlines. Allows the Pakistanis to focus on their cricket, says Mahmoud. Manish says, reading the Lou Vincent match-fixing case, my interest in cricket, especially IPL, has gone down. These declarations, forfeitures in county cricket, should be banned by the ECB as it is a form of match-fixing. That one from Alan Bain. Those are the views. Well, match-fixing in cricket is not going to go away because it seems that it's simply too prevalent. The latest court case talks about how wide-ranging it is, even in county cricket in England. Very, very concerning and very alarming indeed. But let's have a quick look now what's on Newsroom's Facebook page today. A landmark lawsuit by mine workers currently being heard. Gauteng High Court, if the application succeeds, they could launch the biggest class action suit in the country's history. Then, Zimbabwe will not charge American dentist Walter Palmer for killing its most prized lion in July because he had obtained legal authority to conduct a hunt. And President Barack Obama said Donald Trump was the classic reality TV character who had tapped into something real in the Republican Party but was unlikely to end up as the president of the country. Yeah, it's become personal between Barack Obama and Donald Trump. Throw a little bit of Kanye West in the mix and you've got a powder keg that will explode as we get closer to the primaries. Time for us to take a break. We'll be back with Newsroom right after this.
Across the globe, locally, and on the entire continent. Every second, every minute, and every hour. There's always a breaking story. We commit to giving you the most important, significant, and interesting news. That's why it is not a surprise that more Africans are tuning to SABC News to find out what is happening. Because when news break, we've got you covered. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back. You're still watching Newsroom on SABC News. Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi wants to outlaw smoking in certain public areas completely because there's no valid reason to smoke any form of cigarettes. He says he also wants to do away with e-cigarettes. Now, Minister Motsoaledi believes there should be no smoking zones whatsoever in places frequented by the public. South Africa, that became one of the first countries in the world to ban smoking in public places in the year 2000 when it introduced its Tobacco Products Control Amendment Act. The South African smoking laws were tightened even further in 2009 when the government banned smoking in partially enclosed public spaces such as covered patios, verandas, balconies, walkways and parking areas where there were children under the age of 12 years old present. Now, children under the age of 18 were also prohibited from entering designated smoking areas and purchasing cigarettes. Now, to talk to us on the matter, well, we are joined by Dr. Yusuf Saluji, who is the head of the National Council Against Smoking, and then from the Free Market Foundation, Mr. Leo Lowe, who is their executive director. If I can start with you, Dr. Saluji, the latest call by the minister, can you maybe give us your views, your reaction to it?
The National Council Against Smoking supports it, and not only the Council, but there's public demand for public places to be smoke-free. Why do we need smoke-free public places? The answer is simple. Breathing other people's tobacco smoke causes harm and disease in non-smokers. So what smokers do to themselves is their business, but what they do to other people becomes a matter for the public. And it causes lung cancer and heart disease in adults, and in children it can cause respiratory disease and sudden infant death syndrome. So there is a need for this law, and more importantly, the public supports it. A survey by the University of Pretoria showed that 80% of the public, including 72% of smokers, 72% of smokers said that all public places, indoor public places, should be 100% no smoking. And the law works. In Ireland, they went smoke-free in 2003, and the pubs went smoke-free. There were claims that the pubs would close down, that the public would revolt, and all sorts of things. And none of that happened. The law works very well.
Your view?
Well, just note there's been a slippery slide from defining private places as public places. My office is a private place, not a public place. So I have a sign on it, although I'm a lifelong non-smoker and I don't like smoking, a sign that says smokers welcome, and it's obligatory for anyone from the council against smokers. It says against smoking, but it's against smokers. And so anyone from the Department of Health who enters my property without smoking will be arrested for trespassing. It is not public property. So let's understand clearly that what we've done now is we've actually prohibited and are prohibiting smoking in private property and driving people paradoxically and ironically into public property, namely sidewalks and streets and parks and parking lots, where I, a non-smoker, am now subjected to their tobacco smoke. I would far prefer them to be indoors in ventilated places where I am not their victim. The strange thing about this law is it turns non-smokers into victims, quite the opposite of protecting us.
How do you view that?
Utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. Firstly, Mr. Lowe calls me an anti-smoker. He can't distinguish between people and their behavior. I am for smokers. I want smokers to live long, healthy lives. I'm not against them, but he uses invectives like that. The second thing is he says we're going to drive people from indoor places to outdoor places. But that's exactly right. Indoors, the levels of pollutants can build up very high. We're talking of arsenic, cyanide, carbon monoxide, nicotine, all known poisons which cause harm. If you take it out on the streets, it'll be dispersed. When it's indoors, it causes harm. And finally, he talks about private places. His office is a private place. I don't know what he's talking about. If you have food laws that apply to kitchens everywhere, these are basic, sensible laws, and the law says you cannot harm other people. And this is what this law does. It protects people from harm caused by others.
Your response to that, sir?
Well, if you cared about the dignity and freedom of people like you and me, then you would allow us, if we wanted to have a smoking obligatory restaurant where you have to smoke to go in, or where smoking is allowed and non-smokers can go there by their choice. So the issue here is actually not about health or smoking. The issue here is about civil liberties and freedom. If you will not allow people to choose to smoke because of whatever the benefits they get, the pleasure, the satisfaction, dealing with stress, whatever it might be, then you also have to stop people being allowed to be obese or eat junk food or to have a sedentary lifestyle and not exercise or to drink or to gamble or anything else. So once you go on the slippery slope, then you can't stop with sugar and salt and junk food. And anything that Dr. Saluji regards as unhealthy is then fair game for control. So this is actually about your personal dignity and freedom, Eben, and whether it is going to be invaded by people who think you're silly.
Dr. Saluji, yes, sir. Please, we're talking about the freedom, liberty.
Right. Let's talk about freedom. We live in a democracy, and in a democracy, the majority rule. What does the majority of South Africans want? The majority of South Africans want smoke-free public places. He talks about smoke-free, slippery slopes. He can't distinguish between the important and the trivial. Our courts say, and our Constitution says, that the level of regulation of a product must be in proportion to the harm it causes. The government can't just do what it wants nilly-willy. The government respects freedom and is promoting freedom through tobacco control legislation.
I want to conclude today's conversation by shifting focus quickly to electronic cigarettes, because electronic cigarettes are growing exponentially around the world. Firstly, what is your view on electronic cigarettes? And then we can conclude maybe with Dr. Saluji giving us his view.
Well, I'm no scientist. As far as I can tell, and from what I read, they are either harmless or comparatively harmless compared to all sorts of other substances, ranging from condomless sex to driving a motor car. These are actually more dangerous. But what I would say is you should be just as free to smoke a fume cigarette or electronic cigarette as to do anything else you want to do. It makes no difference what it is you do with yourself. I would like to privatize your mouth. I would like you to decide what comes out of it and what goes into it.
We have some live tweets. People are very interested in this. They say, SABC Newsroom, it must be banned. If a person is found guilty, they must pay a fine. You know, we've got bicycle lanes outside, and that's not being policed. And that's the kind of thing. It's great to have laws, but Dr. Saliji, at some point we have to police those laws.
But that is the beauty of the Tobacco Products Control Act. Who polices it? Not the ordinary, not the police. It's ordinary people. Every day my council gets calls from people who say, I go to work and people are smoking. I went to a restaurant and I wanted to sit outside with my family and I couldn't because people were smoking. Yeah. It's ordinary citizens who are demanding the right to clean air and acting in support of that. As far as electronic cigarettes are concerned, the National Council Against Smoking says that unfortunately the scientific evidence is not in yet. There is some evidence that it may be less harmful from cigarettes, but for me, that's like saying jumping from the 5th story of a building is less harmful than jumping from the 20th story of a building.
Yeah, you still bounce off the curb, some would say. Keith says, just in conclusion, Keith says, SABC Newsroom, aren't there designated smoking areas in public areas already? Might as well ban the sale of cigarettes totally. And I tell you, the Free Market Foundation's Mr. Leon Lowe won't be happy with that.
No, as I'm not happy with banning anything that you do for your own reasons. I'm just in favour of you controlling yourself. I would like you to be the boss of yourself and not Dr. Saliji.
We are not the bosses, we are the public servants. As I say, we do, the National Council Against Smoking is working in support of what the public wants. Mr. Leon Lowe may want to characterize it in other ways, but he's out of touch with what the public demand is.
Thank you for joining us. That's a wonderful conversation we had, a very mature conversation around smoking, a total ban in smoking, well, in public areas, private areas, wherever. There's the question. Should there be a total ban on cigarettes, including e-cigarettes, here in South Africa? That's our question of the day. You can keep the comments coming. We'll wrap the show today and we'll talk about that as well. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. That is Dr. Yusuf Saliji. He's the head of the National Council Against Smoking. And then from the Free Market Foundation, Mr. Leon Lowe, the executive director there. Thank you for joining us and thank you for giving us those passionate views you did this morning. Well, time for us to have a look at why South Africa is so hot and why the rest of Southern Africa is, well, teetering on the brink of 40 degrees, it seems. Philip Hawkins is there with a weather update.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eben. Well, as we take a look at exactly what it is making our subcontinent so hot, in fact, today we're going to see the alleviation of it, or at least the beginning of the alleviation of very hot temperatures around South Africa's northeastern areas, the southern parts of Zim, these surrounding areas as well, because now we're seeing low pressure systems beginning to take a hold of these areas. And what this means for you and me is it's going to bring these temperatures down very, very slowly, but it will begin to come down from the next few days. We are still expecting hot conditions there. We're also expecting isolated showers to extend in a band from a lower pressure system just off South Africa's southeastern coastline north towards the Caprivi Strip, where we see another lower pressure system. Now into tomorrow, we're going to see those isolated showers extending throughout South Africa's southern coastline in relation once again to lower pressure system activity. We're also going to see isolated showers growing into scattered and eventually widespread showers over some areas of South Africa's southeastern coastal areas, as well as the interior. Lesotho expecting a lot of rain into tomorrow, and that, of course, continuing into Botswana and the Caprivi Strip as well. Let's see what's going on in South Africa's temperatures. Phalaborwa peaks at 37 degrees, and Mbombela shares that same high. You can see these hot conditions continuing through the interior as well, with Kimberley at 35. Pretoria, 1 degree cooler than it was yesterday, 36 degrees, so very, very slowly coming down there. Cape Town peaks at 16, and we're expecting temperatures along that southern coastline to remain in the lower 20s, so a very, very manageable and pleasant day for the most part along that southern coastline, if not a little bit cloudy there. The cloud cover continues along the western coastline here, southern Namibia peaking at 24 degrees in Lüderitz. If you're going to be in the interior, Mariental peaks at 34. Now, wind speeds along that Swakopmund-Walvis Bay coastline expected to be rather high at about 35 to 40 kilometers per hour, so a bit of a gusty one there. Also expect temperatures not much higher than about 17 degrees. It's going to be a bit of a chilly one as well. Very, very opposite to what we're expecting in the interior, though. Take a look at Botswana. 39-degree maximums forecast in Maun. Temperatures not really getting any cooler than 35 in your maximums through Botswana for today, so it is going to be a hot one. And both Beitbridge and Kariba share a 39-degree maximum, although Kariba at least expecting a little bit of cloud cover there. A little bit of respite from that intense sunshine we're seeing through the rest of southern Africa. Northern Mozambique expecting a very hot one again. Tete remaining unchanged, 41 degrees. It's going to be a hot one in Tete for today, of course. Pemba peaking at 31 and Kulimane 35. A little bit of cloud cover makes its way into the area, but dissipates very, very quickly. Take a look at Maputo and Shashai. 38-degree maximums forecast for you there once again. It's going to be another chilly one, and do expect that, rather another very hot one. And quite the opposite there. Do expect that to continue into southern Madagascar, expecting a lot of sunshine in these regions, but some clouds make their way into the northern parts. Of course, we're also expecting quite warm temperatures along that western coastline. As usual, temperatures rising into the 30s. The Comores, 29 to 31-degree maximums. A little bit of cloud cover over Anjouan, but for the most part, expecting a beautifully calm day there. A little bit of a hot one in Victoria there, 33 degrees. Temperatures in Prolan at 28, but expect quite a bit of cloud cover, up to a 60% chance of showers and some electrical activity, as well as some windy conditions just ahead of that. That's called a score line. This is where you can contact us, whether at sabc.co.za or call us directly and speak to us personally, 011 714 5077. That's where I'm going to leave it for now.
But before Phil goes, please give us good news. Phil, tell us it's going to rain later this week.
It definitely will rain later this week. Throughout most of South Africa's northeastern parts, we're expecting those low pressure systems. They're going to come in. They're going to bring in a little bit of rain with them. And at the very least, we'll expect cooler nights, specifically after those rainfalls.
Thank you very much, Phil. When 31 is the coolest one on the map, then you know it's very, very hot. Heat wave continues here. But Elvis has had that on the news. What else are you looking at top of the hour?
You know, we're gonna go back to the industrialists that President Zuma is seeking in this country. A very important developing story there, because how many industrialists do we have in the country that are black? Also, there's a look at the economy and how that can be grown. Also, taking a look at the fires that's in Limpopo. We talked about that earlier. People are tweeting about it. And there's a lot of tweets also unfolding currently, we believe, in terms of the smoking interview you just had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was quite one that stimulated quite a bit of interest. But thanks. Elvis will be back in a couple of minutes, top of the hour, the full news update. I'll be back a little bit later to look at Africa. Don't go away. This is Newsroom right here on SABC News.
Health Talk, your show on health practice.
The people being empowered with knowledge so that they can change their behavior and reduce their risk of being sick.
How serious is stress at work?
If we don't address workplace stress, that negative stress, then it can lead to burnout and it can lead to depression.
How does absentees affect companies?
The one that's really problematic for employers is the one that is unscheduled.
How can companies organize their wellness program?
Health promotion mustn't just be a one-size-fits-all type of approach. It must be customized based on understanding of the unique needs of that particular organization.
For health tips that will help you to adopt healthy living with Dr. Sillo Mutawung on Health Talk every Saturday.
It's more tragedy for Nepal. A 7.3 earthquake struck the Asian country this morning.
Frightened evacuees fled camps and health facilities when the quake struck.
I think it's a really big hit of earthquake because the gate has also slanted and every pole are moving like that they will fall again.
And it comes barely 2 weeks after a 7.8 magnitude quake claimed over 8,000 lives.
The country saw more of its historic buildings and temples destroyed. The country's president Ram Baran Yadav was addressing a meeting when the quake hit.
Primetime News, daily at 6 p.m. CAT.
We ask tough questions.
Have you spoken to the president about resigning?
We ask hard questions.
What you're trying to do requires a lot of money and you don't have money.
We ask quick questions.
A quick one. You are aware that the PIC has now been banned by the IEC?
I'm aware.
And you are also aware that it has been banned because of you?
We ask good questions.
Are you an infiltrated organization?
We also ask funny questions.
Is it safe to eat your chicken?
All the questions, all the time, right here on Question Time, Monday to Thursday at 5:30 p.m.
It's 10:00 hours Central Africa time on this Tuesday, the 13th of October 2015. This is Newsroom. We are broadcasting live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. You have to stay with us as we bring you the latest news from here and around the globe. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be your host until 1200 hours. Coming up in this hour in your headlines. President Jacob Zuma has called for more black industrialists to boost the country's economy. The High Court in Cape Town will today hear arguments in the DA's review application to have the SABC Chief Operating Officer Hlaudi Motsoeneng's permanent appointment set aside. And a global study in partnership with UN Women shows that peace endures when women participate meaningfully in peace talks. Those are all your headlines. But coming up in sports with Kendall Makamata, he's standing by.
Good morning, Elvis. Thank you very much, and good morning to you all. Coming up in sports today, we've got Bafana, who finished their Central American tour with a match against Honduras tonight, hoping to emulate the heroics against Costa Rica, where they won by a single goal to 0. And the match-fixing trial of former Black Cap captain Chris Cairns continues in London with testimony from former teammates. And that, in a nutshell, is what we've got in sport for you today. Make sure you stick around for that around about 10:20 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's now take a look at your top story this hour. President Jacob Zuma says South Africa needs to produce more black industrialists to boost the country's economy. The president urged business people not to focus solely on trading in shares. President Zuma was speaking at the 20th anniversary of the Community Investment Ventures Holdings, a black-owned company which focuses on telecommunications, power and information technology sectors last night in Sandton. The president applauded the company for its fearlessness.
This country will never prosper if the majority of the people are not part of the mainstream of the economy. Because it is quite a unique thing, perhaps only South Africa, that we have such a situation where the majority are poor and are not part of the economy. We have opened up a sector that has never been used seriously. The ocean economy. The opportunities are beyond any imagination.
School children travelling to school by train in East London area are in for a better experience. The Eastern Cape Transport Department has launched special coaches for learners travelling from Mdantsane and the surrounding areas to East London. The new coaches are aimed at improving the safety of pupils in trains, whilst at the same time creating an exciting travelling environment for learners. Now, for more on the story, we cross live to our reporter, Busisiwe Jamsana, who is standing by at the Berlin train station near Mdantsane. A very good morning to you and welcome.
A very good morning to you too, Elvis. We are indeed in the East London train station. Now, we were traveling this morning from the Berlin train station with the learners, with the pupils from various schools, from various areas to East London. The two coaches indeed have been launched. They have been revamped. Out with the bunk stools and in with the leather seats, TV screens and special attention, special security guards aimed at making sure that safety of these pupils inside these coaches, inside the metro rail trains is up to standard. Order of the day is making sure that these kids are safe and that they have an experience, an exciting experience rather, on their way to school.
Now, how problematic was the school trains on the transport in the area?
It was very problematic, Elvis, from vulgar language. These pupils were exposed to vulgar language. Whilst we spoke to them earlier today, they were telling us that at times married couples would swear at each other, would argue in front of them, and at times people would just go in and grab their phones from them. But most importantly, what they identified as the most challenging issue they had whilst they were traveling with the elderly was that when they were seated, elderly people would come and they would request them to stand, saying that they are children, they should be standing. But now it is a thing of the past. They have two coaches specifically designed for them with the leather seats and other things.
Now, if you look inside that coach, I can see the train behind you. Can you describe and paint us a picture of what's happening inside that train?
Well, inside this train, Elvis, there are leather seats, as I mentioned. There's a big TV screen. It's totally different from the coaches that they used to travel in. The other coach on the opposite side has got bunk stools, yellow bunk stools that they used to sit in. But this new one now, the revamped coaches, they've got leather seats, leather chairs that they can sit individually on without sharing the seats with other people. They're very different. Even the color, the branding of the outside of the coaches are different. But this is just a glimpse of the bigger picture, Elvis. The Metro Rail and the Transport Department is planning on partnering with the Education Department, partnering with the SABC to make sure that there are teachers on board, there are educational programs on board whilst the children are traveling to school. They're able to get some education. Also, they plan on having a mobile library so that these pupils, on their ways to school, they can grab a book and read. They can do their homeworks inside these coaches. It is comfortable, it is up to standard, and the aim is to make sure that education is brought to these kids.
Busisiwe, is the launch only for trains running between Mdantsane and East London, or is there any further plans and future plans that are linked to this project?
As a matter of fact, Elvis, there are plans to make sure that this program is extended or expanded to the Port Elizabeth area, to make sure that even the Port Elizabeth train is also incorporated. They have these coaches. Also, there is a plan to make sure that they increase the coaches, because whilst we are traveling with these kids, the space is not enough. Two coaches are just not enough. It was congested. The Metro Rail manager, Zovuyo Sokoko, did say that they plan on having more coaches, and she was saying that coaches are not a problem. They just need stakeholders to come on board. They are going to brand other coaches to make sure that they expand. They're looking at having 6 coaches in this area and also expanding to Port Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for that report. That's our reporter, Busisiwe Jemsana, coming to us live at the Berlin station in East London. Now, the High Court in Cape Town will today hear arguments in the DA's review application to have the SABC Chief Operating Officer Hlaudi Motsoeneng's permanent appointment set aside. Now, this is what's called Part B of the party's court bid. In its court application, the DA refers to the public protector's findings that Motsoeneng lied about having a matric certificate. He purged staff who were not loyal to him and allegedly inflated his salary. Motsoeneng, the SABC and the Communications Minister Faith Mutambe lost their appeal in the Supreme Court in Bloemfontein last week. They were challenging whether Madonsela's remedial action was binding. Now, this comes after Madonsela recommended that the SABC should institute disciplinary proceedings against Motsoeneng. But the SABC is now challenging the Supreme Court of Appeal's ruling in the Constitutional Court. Abatembu King Buyelakaya Dalindyebo is expected to appear in the Mthatha High Court in the Eastern Cape today for the extension of his bail. This as he intends approaching the Constitutional Court after his appeal was refused by the Supreme Court of Appeal last week. He faces a jail sentence for various crimes committed in the 1990s. King Dalindyebo believes that customary law should have been taken into consideration as it is entrenched in the South African Constitution. Today, his legal team is expected to try and convince the judge and provide valid reasons as to why his bail should be extended. He has notified the court of his intention to approach the highest court in the land over his conviction and sentence. He wants the Constitutional Court to clarify why Roman Dutch law and English common law dominate the South African legal system. He argues that if indigenous legal systems was not undermined, he wouldn't have been convicted. The ANC says it wants to do well during the local government elections next year. Speaking to our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena, after the ANC NGC, the party spokesperson, Zizi Kodwa, said the mayoral candidates are likely to be announced before the elections.
All the metros. That's why, among others, we had said in some of the metros, especially those are strategic, we must actually review our strategies. We must perhaps announce our candidates, mayoral candidates in those metros ahead of time so that they are part of the campaign, they can aid the campaign, which is a new element in terms of our campaign as well, where we were only introducing our mayoral candidate after elections. So there are a number of new strategies we're going to look at. We're going to review our election strategy. We want to make sure that we win almost all wards, including some parts of the Western Cape where we're beginning to almost regain the lost ground in the Western Cape. And we think that in the selection, we must make sure that we emphasize the element of public participation, because we want candidates who are popular, who are known, who are work hard, who are competent, who work for the community. We don't want only people who represent the views of the ANC, but those who represent, but also who are loved by the community, who are hardworking, who are known in the communities. We want such candidates.
Another strike is looming in the gold mining sector. Thousands of members of trade union AMCU have voted overwhelmingly to down tools in support of their wage demands. Earlier, the majority union in much of the sector, the National Union of Mine Workers, signed a wage deal with the employers. But the union AMCU abstained, and members of the trade union yesterday voted to down tools. AMCU can now go on a protected strike at Sibanye Gold, where the other unions do not hold a majority. But it's also threatening to strike at Harmony and Anglo Gold. And this is despite the fact that agreements by the majority are extended to minority unions under current bargaining rules. AMCU has been disputing the membership figures and its right to strike at these other mines, and they may have to be determined by the courts. The union says it will wait for the Labour Court's ruling on the union's 2013 appeal to strike before serving notices, as it appears that any industrial action will be delayed until next year. But we'll have to find out more about that. For more on the story, we're now joined in studio by economist Lone Sharp from the Free Market Foundation. Lone, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Morning, thank you.
Looking at the AMCU strike, what do you think that impact will be on the gold mining sector?
You know, the gold mining sector has dwindled. There was a time when it was 12% of the economy. It's now less than 2% of the economy. Gold is still important in our export sectors. Metals in general make up over 60% of our goods exports to the rest of the world. So gold is somewhat important, but not nearly as important as it was even 2 decades ago. The gold mines today at $1,100 an ounce are less profitable than when the gold price was $250 an ounce. So mining profitability has dwindled, the mining sector has dwindled, and I think what we're seeing here is the last attempt to grab part of what is a shrinking pie. Unfortunately, union actions are a large part of why the sector is dwindling. Wage demands for a doubling of entry-level workers' wages and a more than doubling of wages for more skilled workers in the sector is just unaffordable, given, especially now, the current crisis in global commodity markets.
Now, you did indicate that the producers are already grappling with the depressed prices and soaring cost in the markets. But how far apart are the parties from each other in order to reach an agreement, you think?
Ultimately, the mining companies will reach an agreement. What is at issue is whether they will continue to use labor in their mines or whether they will continue to economize on the use of labor through automation, mechanization, and so on. We've seen a tremendous amount of mechanization in our mining sector over the last 20 years. Mining output has trebled. Mining exports have more than trebled, but the workforce is only a third of what it was 20 years ago. So the mines make adjustments in the use of labor, they economize on workers, and I don't know that the trade unions representing workers are so upfront as they should be about what the economic consequences will be. For example, just to make back the money lost, the wages lost while on strike, takes 3, 4, or 5 years with the amount of the increase that's at stake. So I think union bosses, none of them will lose wages during the strike. So they get workers all hotted up to go on strike and down tools. But I don't think there is a clear understanding of what is at stake. They will never make back the money that is at risk. And at the same time, we're going now into the December-January period when many people would have gone away on leave in the mines. They may be going on leave unemployed.
The unions are arguing that the employers or the workers do not get enough money. But can the employer afford the demands by AMCU, 12,500 rand?
Yeah, there's no way that the mines can. But I think there's more going on here than simply wages and working conditions. My best assessment is that a small group of union bosses and workers, very influential workers, intimidate other workers into going on strike. The people that we see on television with weapons and chanting, this is a tiny minority of the workforce. The overwhelming proportion of the workforce want to continue working. It's devastating for those workers if they stop working without pay. So I think there's more going on here. There's a fight for political relevance. There's a fight for relevance as a trade union. And I think, lately, over the last few years, less than 7% of workers on strike have actually come out in support of the strike.
Now, we've seen AMCU led that bruising 5-month strike last year in the platinum sector. In 2015, do you think that we'll have a similar situation where we have a long, protracted strike and no agreement at the end?
No, I don't think we will, not in the gold sector. We could have that in the municipal workers sector. We could see that in some other sectors, maybe steel, but I don't think in the gold sector. I think there's a widespread recognition at the moment that under current circumstances, South Africa's gold sector is uneconomical. And South Africa, with such incredible opportunities for labor-intensive work in the gold sector, is really squandering that opportunity.
Now, the Chamber of Mines said that Harmony and Anglo Gold will go to court to prevent AMCU from going on strike because they have signed wage deals with the 3 other unions. Does the Chamber have grounds to stand on?
Well, the courts are very reluctant to get involved in disputes, and there are really no mechanisms to get involved with disputes among a significant group of workers. I think AMCU has run its course. It's not going to take any further membership away from the other trade unions. So I think at the moment they're turning to extrajudicial procedures to try and make some noise. The courts should, by rights, exclude AMCU, prevent AMCU from going on strike. They're a minority union. On what grounds should they be awarded strike certificates when in fact they don't represent nearly the majority of workers? But there's more going on here, as I say. AMCU's in a battle for survival. NUM and the other unions in the mining sector have responded to AMCU's chasing at their coattails. And I think AMCU is a spent force. But that's exactly why they need to go on strike and demonstrate some kind of belligerence toward employers.
Finally, Lone, just very briefly, how do you think this can be resolved?
Well, I think the closer we are to the market mechanism, the more equitable people will feel it. As they say in a negotiation, if everybody feels hard done by, it was a successful negotiation. Unfortunately, AMCU has, you can hear it from Joseph Matunjwa's statements within AMCU, that he doesn't want to strike necessarily, but the shop stewards want it, some agitating workers want it. How could it be avoided? I think if workers want better wages, they should agree to productivity bonuses. But of course, unions don't want that. But the mines would be happy to pay double the wages if it was only consistent with higher productivity.
Mr. Sharp, as usual, thank you so much for your input.
Thank you.
That was Lone Sharp, an economist here in studio with us. He's from the Free Market Foundation. Let's now move on to other stories. An agreement has been reached in principle for the world's largest brewer, Anheuser-Busch InBev, to buy South Africa's British brewing company, SABMiller, for $109 billion. Now, if the takeover deal succeeds, a single company will be selling 1 in every 3 beers across the globe. The deal is subject to international regulator scrutiny, though. I beg your pardon. The Budweiser maker will pay £44 a share in cash for a majority of the shares in its nearest competitor. The deal will allow the company to gain brands such as Peroni and Grolsch and give it control of about half the industry's profit. The deal has been accelerated by the impact of slowing economies in the emerging markets of China and Brazil. A 20% drop in SABMiller shares in the months preceding the AB InBev's approach and the prospects of an end to cheap credit also served as a catalyst to a takeover. The tentative agreement caps more than 2 weeks of back and forth negotiations over the price. Now we'll take a break and we'll be right back with Kendall Makamata. We'll have your sports stories after the break.
Good. Boy. Sit.
Get behind Rugby World Cup 2015 on SABC.
Good morning and welcome back. I'm Kendall Makhamat and I've got your sports on Newsroom. Now, the match-fixing court case featuring former New Zealand cricketing captain Chris Cairns was back in session yesterday as former teammate Lou Vincent appeared to give his testimony. He was admitted that he was involved in match-fixing, claims he was acting under direct orders from his captain, Cairns. The 36-year-old Vincent said his former leader and role model, Chris Cairns, convinced him to take part in fixing while they were both playing for the Chandigarh Lions in India. He described Cairns as the main player for the New Zealand national side when he started playing for them in around 2001. Cairns allegedly agreed to pay Vincent $50,000 per game to underperform. Vincent told the jury he did deliberately underperform in 4 games in 2008. In 2010, Keynes was accused by the chairman of the Indian Premier League, Lalit Modi, on Twitter of match fixing while he was playing for the Chandigarh Lions in the Indian Cricket League 2 years earlier. Among those that will be called to give evidence are former Australia captain Ricky Ponting, as well as New Zealanders Brendan McCullum and Daniel Vettori. The trial is expected to last over 6 weeks. And Bafana closed their 2-match Central American tour with a match against Honduras tonight. Kicking off at 6 p.m. local time, it will be 2 a.m. South African time and will feature 3 changes to the squad that beat Costa Rica by 1-0 last week. Now, Bafana's international friendly with Honduras this week has had a change of time and will now begin that, like I said, 2 hours earlier on Wednesday morning. The 3 new faces that come in from the first 11 that face Costa Rica are Jabulani Shongwe, Ayanda Patosi and Kamohela Mukocho. They come in for Bongani Zungu, George Libesi and Sibusiso Bilakazi. The win in Costa Rica will have given the players a much-needed boost. They'll be gunning for a 3rd consecutive win this week in San Pedro Sula. Right now, tennis news that South Africa's top-ranked singles player Kevin Anderson has risen 2 places to a career-high 10th on the latest ATP World Rankings. Meanwhile, the United States' John Isner and Spain's Feliciano Lopez are through to the 2nd round of the Shanghai Masters after recording straight sets victories.
13th seeded John Isner didn't even break into a sweat in the opening set against France-Adrien Manarino, comfortably winning it 6-1. The big American was serving for the match 7 games later at 5-2, with Manarino offering no resistance. He won the next 4 points with the Frenchman not returning any of his serves to win the match 6-1, 6-2. Feliciano Lopez and Andrei Kuznetsov's match was not such a lopsided affair, with a tiebreaker in the 2nd set deciding the match. The Spaniard broke Kuznetsov once in the opener to take a 3-2 lead and went on to win the set 6-4. Lopez had an early break in the 2nd set and raised to a 3-1 lead. But the 24-year-old Kuznetsov was able to break back in the 8th game to level the set at 4-all. The next 4 games went with serve, with the 15th seeded Lopez winning the tiebreak 7-3. Frenchman Jo-Wilfried Tsonga came from a set down to beat Spaniard Tommy Robredo 6-7, 6-2, 6-2. Leading 5-2 in the 3rd set, Tsonga easily broke Robredo's service game to clinch victory. Pesing Katlu, SABC News.
Now, before I let you go and say goodbye, just a couple of tweets from some of you with regards to the Bafana match later on tonight. The sports girl you love says, maybe I should take a nap during the day in preparation for this game, Bafana versus Honduras. Interesting. And then Bay reckons, let's be realistic, no one is going to stay till 2 a.m. just to watch Bafana. Ooh, is that where it's dropped down to? Let's see what Sholeidos has got to say. Kune, no matter what, you're still #1 keeper, Bafana for life. Sholeidos, a true fan there. Regardless what happens with Bafana, still a fan for life and backing Kune to be the #1 keeper. That's where we're going to leave it with sports, and we're going to take a short break. Back with more news shortly.
It's more tragedy for Nepal. A 7.3 earthquake struck the Asian country this morning.
Frightened evacuees fled camps and health facilities when the quake struck.
I think it's a really big hit of earthquake because the gate has also slanted and every pole are moving like that they will fall again.
And it comes barely 2 weeks after a 7.8 magnitude quake claimed over 8,000 lives.
The country saw more of its historic buildings and temples destroyed. The country's President Yadav was addressing a meeting when the quake hit.
Primetime News, daily at 6 p.m. CAT.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumela Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News channel.
This is Newsroom. Welcome back. Time for us to shift our focus to what's happening on the African continent now. Girls continue to face challenges in accessing primary school education, and about 15 million girls will never set foot in a classroom compared to over a third of boys who are out of school. This is according to the latest report released yesterday by the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, together with the Global Monitoring Report and the United Nations Girls Education Initiative. The report shows that fewer than half of countries, none in sub-Saharan Africa, have achieved the goal of gender equality in both primary and secondary education, even though all were supposed to achieve this 10 years ago by 2005. Now, joining us today in studio is economic and political analyst Israel Mkhize, who will tell us how gender parity affects the economy of a country. A very good morning to you, Israel. Thanks for being with us again.
Thanks, Eben.
If we look at this report here, it shows that we clearly did not achieve our goals. Why are we facing such a challenge to get more children educated and furthermore have a sense of equality within education on the continent?
Well, I think the problem starts with the notion of exceptionalism when it comes to boys. I mean, it's a cultural thing that there's something special, there's something exceptional about a boy child. That is why you'd find that most families would prioritize the education of a boy because of that notion of exceptionalism vis-a-vis the education of a girl child. Whereas when you look at the facts, you realize that when a girl child has been absorbed within an education system from a primary to secondary and tertiary, the women usually are able to take care of more dependents, if you will. Yeah. But at a structural level, you find that most countries that have issues of political and geopolitics, for instance, the issues of elections, mismanagement of elections. Look at Burundi or Guinea and so on.
Even Rwanda.
What you find is that there is an election, then there is destabilization in the country, there is an uprising from rebels and so on. That trickles down to disturb the social order. The destabilization of the social order influence the schooling. Kids cannot go to school. Schools are vandalized, and there's little absorption of kids into school. And then what happens in other zones where really the confrontation becomes very, very intense, you find that some of the the boy kids, they get absorbed to become child soldiers. So the only thing that children know in those kind of environments is how to operate machine guns. So for any perspective or prospect of being absorbed into the labor market with particular skills, you find that they're only skilled in militia. Hence, you find that they grow up with that culture. It translates into the state. You find that the states are led by the so-called military and dictators. But it started from the upbringing, a particular process that was bringing up people who are growing up in violent and rather non-educational environments.
If I look at the report, it says that Afghanistan was named as the worst performing country for primary enrollment. Then the next 6 countries are on the African continent. The Central African Republic, Chad, Niger, Guinea, Eritrea, and the Ivory Coast. What is happening within the economic and political dynamics within these countries that they seem to be struggling with their educational system?
Obviously, the instability of the economy of a country talks to where they channel their fiscus. Do they channel it on security and the well-being, for instance, of the elite within the state? Or do they channel it in capacitating the education system, the education sector, where then obviously that will factor in the primary absorption. Obviously, when you look at the Millennium Development Goals, goal number 2 addresses the question of every child in the world must particularly in developing countries, must be inside the system. So there is always a correlation and causality between how the political, economic budgeting affects other sectors of society, such as education itself. So all the countries that you've counted, they have political instability. Hence, the budget is not channeled towards education and the development of children, but rather channeled more towards the question of security.
Let's go back to gender equality within this space, and let's focus on the 62 million girls who are still denied their basic right to education on the continent. I want to reverse it. I want to ask you, what value will educating more young women and girls add to an economy of a country on the African continent?
Well, if you educate a girl child, number one, you would teach them that the question of responsible sexual behavior, for instance, obviously that has to be done vis-a-vis with men. So there you are reducing chances of sexually transmitted diseases. Number two, you are reducing early pregnancy. Because usually early pregnancy makes the kids to have to go out and be forced into labor. Number three, you are ensuring that the people who are usually carriers of more dependents, which are usually women, they are well capacitated. Number four, you make sure that you make women to have access or to be ready, have capacity to occupy and have access to occupy any sector in society. Because one of the way of gatekeeping certain sectors of society is to demarcate the education and literature around those societies and say this, like for instance, if you say that pilots is just a male-only field, mining is just male-only field, then you've already chalked out a huge output and capacity for females who could be talented in that space. So educating women, therefore, breaks a lot of bottlenecks and barriers into breaking also the old stereotype that the place of women is in the kitchen and in raising children.
Yeah, that there's men's work and women's work, which is such an old mentality. But the things that curb or stop women from young women from attending schools, things like gender-based violence and child marriage and other traditional and cultural practice. How do we overcome those challenges? How do we look at government policies, or do we look at adjusting social norms? And if so, how do we go about that?
Well, there has to be a multidimensional approach to policy making. Policy must talk to the social orientation, economic and political orientation. Now, how does that happen? When you talk of political orientation, that means that you are adopting principles of democracy, the principles of free speech, freedom of expression. Then once that is there, women can even be able to voice out when there are issues of patriarchy, which are blocking them from progressing in life. On the social front, for instance, if you look in other areas, women are not allowed to even seek certain rights against their spouses. So that diminish their confidence, even participation within the economy. The last and most important thing is that education must be factored, especially of early childhood, within the whole nation of state building and peacekeeping missions. Because if you look at, take a country like Congo, which has a certain presence of the UN peacekeeping forces and also AU, and you just focus on the military and security presence, and you forget the question of that women must be part of the peace-building process, because they're the ones who also not only look at households, they also look at children, the raising of children, teaching them certain values which they may not necessarily be part of the curriculum at school. So it's an overall thing that needs multi-dimensional lessons.
And I think the most important thing of education is that it all starts at home. That's probably the most important thing. But in conclusion, Israel, I want to put this to you and ask you, as an independent observer who attends all these types of conferences where a lot of the talk happens, do you believe that on the continent, we will be able to create parity in education in line with the new Sustainable Development Goals by 2030?
I think we have to confront certain hegemonic notions very robustly. Like, for instance, there are things that we do and say and hide under what we call culture.
Yeah.
For instance, there are certain things which are incurred from the religious or cultural notions, like women are not supposed to do this, women are not supposed to do that. You find that we persist on those stereotypes and those hegemonies they build in our mind to an extent that women end up believing those things, that they are not supposed to do certain things. So unless we confront some of those so-called cultural-oriented bottlenecks or suppressive things, we are not going to catch up with the Vision 2030, I'm afraid, or even the Vision 2060 of the African Union.
Vision 2063.
Yes,
it's a long road ahead, but, you know, the discussions start, and hopefully we can escalate these discussions in the months and years to come. Israel Mkhize, it's always nice to have you with us, political and economic analyst. He's our resident here. Every Tuesday comes and talks about the issues facing the African continent. Today, we were talking about gender parity within the education systems and how this plays out into the economies of various African countries. What are the things that's holding us back, and why it's so important for us to educate young women on the continent? Israel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, let's shift our focus to, well, the news of the day, around what newspapers are talking around the African continent. We look to Swaziland first. Now, the Swaziland Observer leads with Ledwaba Insurance Company former CEO Piwa Inkosi Gininza and 4 others. They were acquitted of corruption-related charges by the Manzini Principal Magistrate, David Kumalo. Interesting story there on the front page. Then we move to Nigeria, where this day reports that ahead of today's screening and confirmation of the first batch of ministerial nominees by the Senate, President Muhammadu Buhari yesterday submitted a second list of nominees to the Senate President Bukola Saraki. Then, finally, in Namibia, the Windhoek Observer says government has agreed to an out-of-court settlement in a civil case in which Power Oyeno Construction was suing the National Housing Enterprise and the Minister of Urban and Rural Development for 102 million Namibian dollars over unpaid invoices related to the suspended mass housing project. Those are some of the headlines around the African continent. It's a new feature that we hope to introduce, and hopefully you can interact with us with what is happening on the continent. Now, South Africa is not the only country that's been experiencing an extreme heat wave. Other countries in the southern African region are also feeling the heat as temperatures continue to soar above 40 degrees in some places. Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Botswana, Zambia and Malawi have all seen widespread daytime temperatures above 36 degrees since this Sunday past. It's caused a lot of consternation. You are told to hydrate, drink lots of water. What's my name says, when is this heat wave going to be over? Well, we're hoping by the end of this week. There's rain forecast from Wednesday, Thursday onwards. Brent Lindeke talks about, as the heat wave in Joburg continues, pack a few extra cold waters in your car to hand out to people standing in the hot sun. Change one thing, and we thank you, Brent Lindeke. That's what we want to see on the African continent. Sprunk Jean says it is very hard fall season. Winter is not on the horizon. Worn out fighting this heat and waiting for cold. Talking about heat wave and drought, yes, it is a legitimate concern. Then Tembi says, I think drinking plenty of water, or just as much as we can in this heat wave, should be our first priority. Yes, if you're feeling you're getting a headache, well, that's because you're dehydrated and you haven't had enough water to drink in this heat. If you're feeling a loss of energy, if you feel a little bit flat, it's because you're not drinking enough water. Well, we stay with education on the African continent now. About 1.5 million children in Kenya do not attend school due to poverty, child marriage and other gender-related practices. But the United Nations International Emergency Fund, together with Qatar's Education Above All Foundation, have recently launched an educational program called Operation Come to School, which Well, it aims at giving about 300,000 children living in rural areas the chance to be educated. Last week, we spoke to UNICEF representative Daniel Baheta via Skype. He was in Nairobi.
First of all, I think we should begin with progress. As you know, the Millennium Development Goals have achieved quite a bit, and I think the Kenyan government needs to be praised in that in the last 15 years during the MDGs, they have been able to achieve quite a lot. The investment level required to get 10 million children to school has been quite impressive. And comparing them to other countries in the region, the Kenyan government invests quite a lot on education. And so I think that the starting point is we have done quite well. But as you know, giving access to all children, particularly those who are vulnerable in the rural areas, in the urban slums, as well as for nomadic communities and those who have not been given traditionally access to education remains quite challenging. And the last 5–10% of those kids particularly becomes quite challenging. And the reasons are quite a lot. I think you have described them in your intro as well. Poverty plays quite a great impact on rural communities, cultural practices, early marriages, nomadic communities moving from one to the other and not wanting to leave their children, particularly their girls, behind to boarding schools are some of the reasons why children don't attend school.
What about the rollout of this project? Is it going to be rolled out in stages over the next couple of years?
Yes, so with the support of Educate a Child, of course, as you know, Her Highness Sheikh Hamusa has been the champion of Educate a Child, and with the support that we're getting from the Qatar Foundation, we are going to start the program. As you said, there are about 1.5 million children that are out of school, and in the next 3 years, we are going to bring 300,000 children back to school, and this is again, with the support of the early, holistically looking at. First, I think as UNICEF, we need to identify where the children are, and we have done quite lots of work to identify where the kids are and how we can reach them. And our focus is in the arid and semi-arid areas. Our focus will be on girls, on children's disability, and particularly in the urban setting, young boys who are very vulnerable, and that's the aim of the project. That's what we'll be doing. This is part of the, our natural engagement with the government, and the government sits at the driver's seat. And one of the most interesting initiatives now is we're asking government and county government to match the funds. If we are giving them $1, we're asking them to invest that amount of money so we can put our efforts together in order to respond to the challenges we'll be facing.
And what are the grades that you're going to be focusing on initially?
Can you repeat that again?
What are the grades you're going to be focusing on initially?
Well, the initial focus is looking at really the rural communities, the nomadic communities, and looking at what are some of the innovative strategies. Either is it using mobile schools, is it using the traditional entry points, the chronic schools, or what is the strategy that would work to bring communities back to this conversation, engaging the communities to say, look, if you bring your children, this is a benefit. So there is a lot of work we have to do, especially on the advocacy with communities. With the Community for Development program, we need to advocate so we can convince community. We need to make communities want education, and that is going to be our first strategy, is to trying to bring in to sell education. The other challenge is, often educators come from outside. So one of UNICEF's strategic objectives for this particular initiative is how do we make communities, locals who have reached grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, girls and boys, to teach back into their community so the community can have some sort of acceptance. If they see their own children teaching, their own girls teaching, then they will be much more likely to be convinced to bring in their kids. So those are the 3 or 4 strategic objectives that we have to bring in children back to school.
Now, South Africa is not the only country that's battling with this current heat wave. Several southern African countries are also experiencing extreme temperatures. The mercury soared in Zimbabwe, peaking at 41 degrees Celsius in some parts of that country.
Cooling off from the unbearable heat as the hot weather in South Africa slowly drifts north.
It's too much. Compared with the previous years, there's a difference.
On the bright side, the heat has tripled business for street vendors illegally selling water along busy intersections.
Nowadays it seems it's better than last time. Yes. But only the problem with us is only council. We have a problem with the council.
Zimbabwe's Met Department has been monitoring the soaring temperature. It concedes it's very hot, but says the temperatures don't yet qualify as a heat wave. Harare peaked at 33 degrees over the weekend, but would need to reach 34 degrees to be considered excessive.
We've seen temperatures being in the higher range over the past few days, going up to 41 degrees Celsius over the Limpopo Valley, also 40 degrees Celsius over the Zambezi Valley. But at this time of the year, these temperatures are quite normal. They are high temperatures, but when they are continuously for some period of time, they tend to have a negative effect on people. Therefore, the temperatures are with us. This is normal for this time of October. No records have been broken as yet.
Violent thunderstorms are expected over the next few days, and they will bring some respite, but temperatures will rise again.
But they tend to be generally high, that is in the upper 30s for most of the time.
The news, little relief for Zimbabweans. The Met Department has predicted a late start to the rainy season, which could also be a potential blow to the agricultural-based economy. Shinga Nyoka, SABC News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Yeah, it's hot all over. Philip is standing by to give us another update, tell us what's happening in southern Central Africa and around. But before we go there, let's get a quick one from Anine. Anine, you've been on the social media wires for the whole morning thus far. Just tell us what's the latest that you're seeing, what should people be looking out for, and what are we talking about this morning?
Well, Eben, earlier in the news, we spoke about the raging fires in the Limpopo district. We've got a hashtag going around on Twitter, hashtag Limpopo fires. Unfortunately, not a lot of people actually tweeting pictures or saying a lot about it, but we do have a reporter who tweeted this morning, Jabulani Baloy. You can follow him on Twitter. He talked about the firefighter that died yesterday in the Waterberg district. Yeah. Very sad news. That's the tweet over there that he sent out, so you can just follow that handle.
Firefighter burnt to death by wildfire outside Valvata in Limpopo. The raging fires have also destroyed properties. Many properties, I can tell you, destroyed. It is bone dry throughout Limpopo. Actually, it's bone dry throughout the northern parts of the country. Don't flick out cigarette stubs. Don't throw bottles out into the veld. Please don't do that. You're causing much more damage than you can ever imagine.
And then, Eben, the next tweet, they're working on fire, seems to be involved in this entire operation, and they have tweeted that 4 more teams have been dispatched there. So we know a lot of teams working in Limpopo currently to get that situation under control.
People in Limpopo are dying because of the fires caused by the heat wave, but no one's reporting it. Well, we are reporting it. Send us your pictures. Send more pictures. Send more pictures is what we want to see. We want to see what is happening. And there we have a map. What is the maps talking about, Anine?
Well, that's just indicating where some of these fires could be breaking out, but maybe Phil can tell us how accurate that actually is, because that is doing the rounds on Twitter.
So, yeah, this is the orange areas where the fires are all over the northern parts of Limpopo. Phil is actually standing by to give us a quick update. Are we going to go to Phil? Are we done?
Yes,
we're done. Phil, just tell me quickly before you go the report. All over is this accurate, all these fires raging in the north of the country?
I'm sure that is accurate. I think the smaller ones would be localized fires, but such a big, I mean, you can actually see the key on the right there. There's a huge temperature difference, all the way above 355 degrees Kelvin, which could only really be fires in such a big area. I'm sure it is accurate.
Well, that's very scary. We're going to have a look throughout the rest of the week and see if we can get the effect that these fires have had on people's lives. But Philip is standing by to give us a quick roundup of what the weather will be doing, not just in South Africa, but the rest of the African continent. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Let's start off by taking a look at what's going on in South Africa's eastern areas, because this is what everybody wants to know about. When is the heat wave going to end? Well, in Southern Africa's eastern interior, we are still expecting very, very hot temperatures to continue today. In fact, South African Weather Services have issued warnings for veld fires. We're currently experiencing veld fires in the Limpopo province, so it is a very dangerously hot and dry condition there at the moment. But good news, low pressure systems making their way towards the area. These are going to alleviate that pressure on the heat a little bit, and it will be gradual, but we are definitely going to see that temperature dropping very gradually as we move later into the week and towards the weekend. But as we take a look towards the rest of Southern Africa, seeing partly cloudy to mostly clear skies towards South Africa's western points. And as we move into tomorrow, that's due to continue partly cloudy skies will begin to yield isolated showers along South Africa's southern coastline. So as we take a look there, we're going to focus on the eastern regions again, because here is the good news. We're expecting a lot of rainfall to make its way towards South Africa's eastern interior here. This is the conjunction of two low pressure systems meeting in the area and both drawing in a lot of moisture towards that area. Of course, we're also expecting that to move towards the interior of Botswana as well. This will definitely do some good for the agricultural industry, and indeed both countries needing it. So let's take a look at what's going on in South Africa's temperatures. Pelopor peaks at 37 degrees. Temperatures in some parts of the Limpopo province rising to about 41 degrees today. It is going to be a very hot one. Pretoria dropping by about 1 degree from yesterday. It's at 36 degree maximum forecast for today. Along that southern coastline, much more pleasant temperatures, 22 degrees in East London, 22 in Port Elizabeth as well, and Cape Town peaking at about 16 degrees. Along that southern coastline of southern Namibia, we're expecting temperatures to range between 18 and 24 degrees. Wind speeds at about 30 kilometers per hour off the coastline of Oranienburg, with Karasburg peaking at 24. Temperatures only rising as we move further north, particularly in the interior, all the way up to 36 in Oshakati, with temperatures along that coastal region much cooler there. Nothing cool about the Botswanan weather for today. 39 degree maximums for Maun. We're expecting temperatures to reach no lower in your maximums than 35, and that is for Chabong. So you can definitely expect another hot one there. Let's just hope for that rainfall. There's only isolated showers forecast, but nevertheless, it will do a lot of good there. Victoria Falls at 38 degrees, temperatures peaking at 39, both Bite Bridge and Kariba. Bite Bridge, though, expecting an entirely clear day. It's going to be a scorcher of a day in Bite Bridge there. So do remember to stay out of the sun if you can, stay indoors and keep yourself cool. Tete, even warm at 41 degree maximum temperatures. We're expecting a little bit of cloud cover in that area, though. Do expect some cloud cover to reach higher levels as we move towards Kwelemane, but moving further south, that dissipates entirely. It's going to be a beautifully sunny day, if not a bit of a hot one in Shai and Maputo, 38 degree maximums there. But possibility of a little bit of higher level cloud cover in those areas, just providing a bit of relief. Southern Madagascar experiencing 31 degree highs in the extreme southern regions there. Temperatures remaining in the 30s and higher 20s as we move further north as well, with a very small chance of rainfall extending through from Antsiranana towards Tomasina and again across the country over the capital of Antananarivo. Maximum of 29 degrees forecast for the capital there. And also expect 29 degree highs for both Moroni and Mamautsu. Now the Comores expecting a beautiful day here. The island regions continuing on warm temperatures there, 33 degrees in Victoria. Prolan expecting isolated to scattered showers. Now this means that there might be a little bit of electricity in the air, and it might just rain pretty hard in that area as well. Squall lines ahead of that means that we might just see some higher wind speeds ahead of that as well. This is where you can contact us with your feedback, weather at sabc.co.za. 011-714-5077 is our telephone number if you want to talk to us personally. And do remember, if you're in Limpopo and you have photographs of those fires, the hashtag is #LimpopoFires.
Yeah, thanks very much, Phil. Yes, send us pictures. Send us pictures at SABC Newsroom. That's where we want you to interact with us with regards to the fires going on. But obviously standing by with an update. Elvis?
Eben, we're going to shift focus. Guinea. Remember the elections this weekend passed? Well, the opposition are crying foul. They want a recount. And there's going to be problems there, it seems like. Remember, Guinea is prone to violence after elections.
Yeah,
so
we've seen it.
Keep a close eye on that.
We've seen it in 2010. We've seen it before. Let's hope that there's not too much bloodshed there. But, well, we're wrapping it now. Elvis is back with Kendall with a quick wrap, top of the hour. See you then.
across the globe, locally, and on the entire continent. Every second, every minute, and every hour. There's always a breaking story. We commit to giving you the most important, significant, and interesting news. That's why it is not a surprise that more Africans are tuning to SABC News to find out what is happening. Because when news break, we've got you covered. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News channel.
SABC brings to you Rugby World Cup 2015.
Let's do this.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time on this Tuesday, the 3rd of October 2015. This is Newsroom. We are broadcasting live from Auckland Park Studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. You have to stay with us as we bring you the latest news from here and around the globe. I'm Elvis Preston, your host until 12 o'clock. Coming up in this hour in your headlines. President Jacob Zuma has called for more black industrialists to boost the country's economy. The High Court in Cape Town will today hear arguments in the DA's review application to have SABC Chief Operating Officer Hlaudi Motsoeneng's permanent appointment set aside. And a global study in partnership with UN Women shows that peace endures when women participate meaningfully in peace talks. Those are all your news headlines. But Kendall Makamatev standing by with your sports report. It's coming up, Kendall.
No, absolutely. Now, good morning, and good morning to everybody back home as well. In terms of the sports, we're going to give you a quick rundown of what we've got. Bafana finished their Central American tour with a match against Honduras tonight, hoping to emulate their heroics against Costa Rica, where they won by a single goal to 0. And in London, the match-fixing trial of former Black Cap captain Chris Keynes continues with testimony from former teammates. And that's your sports for today in a nutshell. Make sure you stick around. At about 11:30, we'll be doing that. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Our top story this hour. Some economists have warned that the deal between the world's largest brewer, Anheuser-Busch InBev, and South Africa's British brewing company, SAB Miller, could create an unhealthy monopoly. Now, they also say it would be bad for South Africa. An agreement has been reached in principle between the two companies for $109 million. The deal is still subject to international regulator scrutiny. If the takeover deal succeeds, a single company will be selling 1 in every 3 beers across the globe. The deal will allow the company to gain brands such as Peroni and Grolsch and give it control of about half the industry's profit. The tentative agreement caps more than 2 weeks of back-and-forth negotiations over the price. Botswana will use some of its $8.5 billion in foreign exchange reserves to stimulate the economy. This after a drop in diamond prices hit growth in the world's biggest producer. Last month, the southern African country slashed its 2015 growth forecast from 4.9% to 2.6% and said the country would post a budget deficit this year and next year.
Diamonds account for around 75% of Botswana's foreign exchange earnings and 30% of GDP. Now the country is planning to diversify from diamonds as global prices of the precious stones dropped on low demand and is affecting the economy. The value of rough diamond exports from Botswana's mines fell 15% in the first 6 months of the year. Botswana's President Ian Khama says they realize the economy is stagnant and the time has come for them to make bold decisions and implement new projects that will boost the economy. But that doesn't mean they're going to be reckless. The economic stimulus, which Khama said will be ready in a few weeks, will target tourism development, agricultural production, construction and manufacturing. Botswana currently has $8.5 billion in foreign currency reserves, with around half held in sovereign wealth fund.
President Jacob Zuma says South Africa needs to produce more black industrialists to boost the country's economy. He urged business people not to focus solely on trading in shares. President Zuma was speaking at the 20th anniversary of the Community Investment Ventures Holdings, a black-owned company which focuses on telecommunications, power and information technology sectors, last night in Sandton. The president applauded the company for its fearlessness.
This country will never prosper if the majority of the people are not part of the mainstream of the economy. Because it is quite a unique thing, perhaps only South Africa, that we have such a situation where the majority are poor and are not part of the economy. We have opened up a sector that has never been used seriously, the ocean economy. The opportunities are beyond any imagination.
The High Court in Cape Town will today hear arguments in the DA's review application to have SABC Chief Operating Officer Hlaudi Motsoeneng's permanent appointment set aside. This is what is called Part B of the party's court bid. In its court application, the DA refers to the Public Protector's findings that Motsoeneng lied about having a matric certificate, purged staff who were not loyal to him, and allegedly inflated his salary. Motsoeneng, the SABC and Communications Minister Faith Mutambi lost their appeal in Supreme Court in Bloemfontein last week. They were challenging whether Madonsela's remedial action was binding. This comes after Madonsela recommended that the SABC should institute disciplinary proceedings against Motsoeneng. But the SABC is now challenging the Supreme Court of Appeal's ruling in the Constitutional Court. Abatembu King Buyelakaya Dalindyebo is expected to appear in the Mthatha High Court in the Eastern Cape today for the extension of his bail. This as he intends approaching the Constitutional Court after his appeal was refused by the Supreme Court of Appeal last week. He faces a jail sentence for various crimes committed in the 1990s. Dalindyebo believes that customary law should have been taken into consideration, as it is entrenched in the South African Constitution. Today, his legal team is expected to try and convince the judge and provide valid reasons as to why his bail should be extended. He has notified the court of his intention to approach the highest court in the land over his conviction and sentence. He wants the Constitutional Court to clarify why Roman Dutch law and English common law dominate the South African legal system. He argues that if indigenous legal systems was not undermined, he wouldn't have been convicted. The ANC says it wants to do well during the local government elections next year. Speaking to our foreign editor, Sophie Mukwena, after the ANC NGC, the party's spokesperson, Zizi Kotwa, said the mayoral candidates are likely to be announced before the elections.
We want to retain all the metros. That's why, among others, we had said in some of the metros, especially those are strategic, we must actually review our strategies. We must perhaps announce our candidates, mayoral candidates in those metros ahead of time so that they are part of the campaign, they can aid the campaign, which is a new element in terms of our campaign as well, where we were only introducing our mayoral candidate after elections. So there are a number of new strategies we're going to look at. We're going to review our election strategy. We want to make sure that we win almost all wards, including some parts of the Western Cape where we're beginning to almost regain the lost ground in the Western Cape. And we think that in the selection, we must make sure that we emphasize the element of public participation, because we want candidates who are popular, who are known, who are work hard, who are competent, who work for the community. We don't want only people who represent the views of the ANC, but those who represent, but also who are loved by the community, who are hardworking, who are known in the communities. We want such candidates.
Ombudsman Judge Bernard Mwepe's report that was submitted to Parliament is expected to be debated today. The Office of the Ombudsman was set up to review and address tax disputes arising between taxpayers and the South African Revenue Services judge. He reports directly to the Minister and works closely with, but independently of, SARS. Early on, Judge Mwepe joined us from our SABC studios in Pretoria.
What is going to happen today is just some kind of a post-mortem of the report itself, a discussion of the report itself. In the report, what people can generally expect would be some of the challenges that were faced by the office, which is a new office, in fact. It's only 2 years old. They'll read about the challenges that we faced in setting up the office, but they'll also read the good news about the services that this office has so far been offering to people who came into our offices or sent emails about the complaints or difficulties that they had in connection with their tax affairs. They will also learn about a variety of type of problems and challenges that these people encountered and the role that this office played in collaboration with SARS in trying to resolve, as far as possible, a number of these challenges.
Taking the train to school is not as romantic as it sounds. It makes for a very long day as the train leaves early. But a new pilot project in East London aims to make the journey more pleasurable and eventually educational. The Eastern Cape Department of Transport, in conjunction with Metro Rail, have put dedicated learner coaches on its train from Berlin to East London. This is to improve the safety of the children and enhance their travelling experience. The new coaches were specifically designed for this project, but this is just the start of a holistic approach with education at its foundation. Plans are in place to partner with the Education Department and the SABC to get teachers on board and have educational programs inside the coaches. Plans to install a mobile library is also on the table. The coaches will also be in use for the trip home in the afternoons. A very lovely initiative there. Meanwhile, firefighters are still battling to put out 2 raging fires around Modimolle in the Waterberg district of Limpopo. The fires have been burning since Friday last week and have destroyed farms and livestock. Working on fires, Provincial Manager Sam Mayepa says they are considering the possibility of deploying 2 aircraft bombers. Farmers and farm workers have joined working on fire personnel in trying to put out the veld fires raging in Limpopo's Waterberg area outside Modimolle. The Alma, Valwater, Northam and Tabazimbi areas are also affected. 15 teams of firefighters from working on fire in Limpopo, Mpumalanga and Gauteng are already battling the flames. The fire began on Friday in veld made tinder dry by the heat wave. It's already claimed the life of a firefighter and killed several animals, as well as destroying 3 lodges and vehicles. Modikwe Ramakhoba was trapped in the flames and died yesterday morning in the Bila hospital. South Africa is not alone in enduring the current heat wave. Several southern African countries are also experiencing extreme temperatures. The mercury soared in Zimbabwe, peaking at 41 degrees Celsius in some parts.
Cooling off from the unbearable heat as the hot weather in South Africa slowly drifts north.
It's too much. Compared with the previous years, there's a difference.
On the bright side, the heat has tripled business for street vendors illegally selling water along busy intersections.
Nowadays it seems it's better than last time. Yes. But only the problem with us is only council. We have a problem with the council.
Zimbabwe's Met Department has been monitoring the soaring temperature. It concedes it's very hot, but says the temperatures don't yet qualify as a heat wave. Harare peaked at 33 degrees over the weekend, but would need to reach 34 degrees to be considered excessive.
We've seen temperatures being in the higher range over the past few days, going up to 41 degrees Celsius over the Limpopo Valley, also 40 degrees Celsius over the Zambezi Valley. But at this time of the year, these temperatures are quite normal. They are high temperatures, but when they are continuously high for some period of time, they tend to have a negative effect on people. Therefore, the temperatures are with us. This is normal for this time of October. No records have been broken as yet.
Violent thunderstorms are expected over the next few days, and they will bring some respite, but temperatures will rise again.
But they tend to be generally high, that is in the upper 30s for most of the time.
The news, little relief for Zimbabweans. The Met Department has predicted a late start to the rainy season, which could also be a potential blow to the agricultural-based economy. Shinga Nyoka, SABC News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Marking the landmark Security Council Resolution 1325 on the important role of women in conflict management and peacekeeping 15 years ago, a new study shows that the gaps in women's participation remain wholly inadequate. A global study in partnership with UN Women presents research showing that peace endures when women can participate meaningfully in peace talks, and that countries are more resilient to conflicts and extremism when gender equality is prioritized.
1325 changed the way the world viewed peace and security. But 15 years later, the role of women continues to be underwhelming.
With a higher representation of women, the work of the peace mission becomes more achievable. It has greater impact. It deters violence against women. It also enables people in the communities to trust, to report.
In 2025, only 11% of peace agreements referenced women, now up to 27%. Only 9% of peace negotiators between 1992 and 2011 were women. Women make up a mere 3% of UN peacekeeping missions, while the rise in extremism is seen in places where women are subordinates.
This proves beyond any doubt from research done by a group in Switzerland that women actually, their participation in peace processes sustains peace processes for a much longer time. That, I think, is one of the leading research findings, that the sustainability is much longer. And therefore, the need for our mediators, negotiators, facilitators to use this information and therefore ensure that women are part of the peace process.
The UN Security Council expected to commemorate Resolution 1325 later Tuesday. Where conflicts and violent extremism pose a quantitative threat to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, this report calls for a more substantive role for women in the power structures of society, the result of which would lead to less conflicts, quicker resolutions, and a more sustainable peace than if men had done it alone. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Guinea's opposition is calling for a rerun of Sunday's presidential election, even before the votes have been counted. It alleges widespread fraud, including ballot boxes being stuffed and some 400 polling stations staying closed. All 7 opposition leaders who contested Guinea's presidential election against the incumbent Alpha Condé say the result should be annulled because of alleged fraud. Their declaration is likely to stoke tension in the West African country. Guinea has a history of political violence, including during the 2010 election that brought Condé to power. Condé, who rose to power in a military coup, is favoured to win a second term. However, the result from Sunday's vote may be close enough to require a second round. The Turkish government said that several people have been detained in connection to a twin suicide bomb blast in the country's capital, Ankara, but declined to give further details. Turkey's government say that extremist militants are the prime suspects for the bombings that killed at least 97 people, but there's been no claim of responsibility.
outside a hospital in Ankara, Mehmet Ali Altun is waiting for his sons to recover. They were there on Saturday when twin suicide bombing struck a pro-Kurdish peace rally, killing at least 97. Altun says one son saw the suspected bomber.
This guy had two bags, one on his back and one in his hand. He blended within the crowd and my boy felt something was wrong. He told me that it was as if somebody whispered to me that this guy is a suicide bomber.
A makeshift memorial is now growing at the blast site. Mourners have been paying tribute with red roses and photos of victims while waiting for answers. Deputy Prime Minister Numan Kurtulmuş says a large number of people has been detained.
I don't want to give any numbers. We have worked meticulously on all the possibilities, usual and unusual suspects. And in order for us to get an acceptable outcome, any speculation should be avoided for the time being.
Government opponents, meanwhile, have blamed President Tayyip Erdogan. Protests have broken out, with many accusing the state at best of intelligence failings and at worst complicity. The government, already facing a growing Kurdish conflict at home, denies the accusations.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed that Israel would not bow to knife terror, which have killed 2 Israelis and wounded more than 20. Referring to past uprisings, Netanyahu said that Israel had overcome previous bombing campaigns and knife terror will not defeat them. There are fears that the tensions are a risk of a full-blown uprising or Palestinian intifada.
It's a scene that's becoming all too common. Israeli soldiers clashing with Palestinians near the West Bank city of Ramallah in what's now 12 consecutive days of violence in the region that's left 25 Palestinians and 4 Israelis dead. Tensions have been stirred in part because of Muslim agitation over high-profile Jewish visits to a contested holy site in Jerusalem. But they've fueled a spate of lone wolf stabbing attacks on Israelis by Palestinians, as many as 4 such attacks just on Monday, with 3 of the attackers shot dead by Israeli forces. The stabbings come amid the growing frustration of younger Palestinians over their lack of statehood and the failure of their leaders to advance peace efforts. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu cautioned Parliament that the roots of the violence go much deeper than that.
Terror does not stem from frustration due to the lack of progress in the diplomatic process. Terror stems from a wish to destroy us. This was the motive for terror in the first days of Zionism, and it is the motive nowadays.
Some 2,000 Israeli police have been deployed in Jerusalem to deal with the violence, but Israeli leaders say there's no quick fix against these lone wolf attacks. The near-daily stabbings are raising speculation that Palestinians could be on the cusp of another uprising or intifada, as the worst spell of street violence seen in years continues.
Now that's your news for now. We'll take a break, and Eben is standing by with more.
Across the globe, locally, and on the entire continent. Every second, every minute, and every hour. There's always a breaking story. We commit to giving you the most important, significant, and interesting news. That's why it is not a surprise that more Africans are tuning to SABC News to find out what is happening. Because when news break, we've got you covered. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back. Time for us to take a more regional focus here in South Africa. We're going to start in the capital. The city of Tshwane has sent a warning, a stern one at that, to residents saying use water responsibly or you could be fined. Now, the city spokesperson, Sabi Bokava, says they have implemented water restrictions in the capital. This comes amid water shortages in some areas due to the ongoing heat wave in some parts of the country, including Gauteng. Bokava says the heat wave has seen the water demand constantly increasing, resulting in reservoirs across the city operating now at very low levels. He says the restrictions will remain in place until further notice. Now, the City of Tshwane spokesperson, Sabi Bokava, he's with us himself to tell us about the situation. Very good morning to you, Sabi. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Yeben, and thanks for having me.
Just paint the picture for us. How dire is the situation with water shortages within the city of Tshwane?
Well, the situation was dire towards the end of last week. And I think by Sunday, the situation had stabilized. Good news is that as I was driving to your studios, I received a call informing me that we are now going to uplift the restrictions as the situation is now back to normal. Our reservoirs and the towers are now operating at full capacity.
How is that possible? We haven't had the big rains that normally brings an end to these types of restrictions.
Well, we attribute this change of fortune to the fact that our message has filtered through. When we communicated on Friday evening and throughout the weekend, appealing to the residents to use water sparingly, it looks like they have heeded our request, because in the main we had asked them to not fill up their swimming pools with water, not to wash their vehicles using hose pipes, not to water their gardens using the irrigation or sprinkler systems. And it seems like they have heeded our request. That is why the situation has returned to normal.
Now, Sabi, the one notice that you put out, you said use water responsibly or you could be fined. How serious was that threat, firstly? And tell us, secondly, about what sort of fines people could then be faced.
Well, it's a move that was a last resort for us. But there's a bylaw that empowers us to go that route. There's a bylaw that says if you don't heed the implementation of the water restriction as per the prescribed relevant bylaw, you are liable for a fine of up to 1,000 rand. Now, how the process unfolds is that we would go to the offending homeowner, give him a written notice, give him a written notice, and if they don't comply, then we go back and we give them a fine of 1,000 rand. If they also refuse to pay the fine, then we take them to court. But the people who would implement or enforce the fine are the Tshwane Metro Police Department bylaw enforcement unit.
Which are the areas that were worst affected in this time period? And then tell us, what do you think the outlook is like for the rest of the early summer?
Well, the areas that are affected were areas in the east of Pretoria, areas which we call affluent, where people have got pools and irrigation systems. Those areas are Erasmus Rand, some parts of Moreleta Park, Eldorraine Extension 1 and 3, Lardas Park, Waterkloof. Those are the areas. We're talking about 11 suburbs. We are hoping that going into the summer, the situation would normalize and people would heed our call to use water sparingly. I think it should be a standard practice, whether there's heat wave or no heat wave. Generally, people must learn to use water sparingly, because water is a scarce resource, not only in Tshwane, but I think across the world. So it's something that we would want to inculcate into our customers or our residents, that they need to use water sparingly.
The city of Tshwane also has been one of the fast-growing metros in the country. since 1994, there's been a real influx in people. Are you happy that the city's infrastructure is now 100% in order and able to cope with the demand that we're seeing?
Well, there's nothing wrong with our infrastructure. I mean, the problems that we experienced towards the end of last week had nothing to do with infrastructure or incompetence or any form of inefficiency. It was a natural phenomenon of a heat wave. But coming back to your question, there's nothing wrong with our infrastructure. We are able to cope with the influx of people who are coming into the city. Of course, we remain behind with infrastructure. We are, for instance, in some parts of Pretoria, we are replacing the asbestos water pipes with the 350 millimeter steel pipes. So over the next 5 years, we have appropriated hundreds of millions of rand to ensure that we improve on our infrastructure and we conduct regular maintenance. But as things stand, our infrastructure is able to cope with whatever situation.
And what about the reaction that you've had after you put out this notice, which has been quite a firm notice to the residents there in the city? What's the reaction been like?
Well, the response has been fantastic. People understood that if they don't heed the call, the water situation would have worsened. I think that's the message that they began to understand, that failure to adhere to our request, the situation would have gotten out of control.
Well, Sabia, thank you for joining us today. Very concerning, of course, water restrictions in the capital. Fortunately, the people of the city of Tshwane have heeded the call, and they are now, well, using less water in the city, even without rains there in the last week or so. Water restrictions are going to be eased there. That's from the spokesperson of the city of Tshwane, Sabi Bokaba, telling us that, you know, the people are using less water, and that's a good thing, and that's something we should all be doing around the country, use less water, especially during this time where it is so very, very hot. Well, time for us to move our focus now elsewhere to Mahikeng. That's in the Northwest Province. Now, friends and business associates of slain businessman Wanda Bosana are appealing to law enforcement agencies to speedily arrest his killers. 2 weeks ago, or 2 weeks into his assassination, no one has been arrested for his killing. Some of his friends, including politicians, believe his assassination was a political hit. Bosana was known for his strong views. He had recently taken the Northwest government to court and attached its property. He was buried this past weekend in Pretoria. This report was compiled by Sello Tatai.
Wanda Bosana, construction mogul, politician and entrepreneur. In May this year, he made damning allegations against the Northwest provincial government. He argued that state tenders are being monopolized for the benefit of the Premier of the Northwest and his close friends. An allegation that was rejected by government. At one meeting, chaos erupted and police had to intervene to break up a standoff between Botswana supporters and members of the ANC Youth League.
It's a very coincidence that a week after taking the provincial government of the Northwest to the Constitutional Court, he is assassinated in the way in which he is.
At the time of his murder, he had successfully attached government property worth millions. This to recoup monies owed to him by government. During his memorial service in Mahikeng, former ANC councillor and now EFF leader told mourners that he believes Botswana's murder was a political hit, drawing parallels with the unsolved murder of Rustenburg whistleblower Mos Phakwe. Phakwe was killed after handing over a dossier of corrupt activities in Rustenburg local municipality to government.
He was a pain in the Northwest government. So he took us to court on 5 different occasions. The provincial government lost.
But the ANC warned opposition parties against using Botswana's death to score cheap political points.
What the opposition is trying to do is just to dislodge, discredit the name of the ANC and attempt even to get votes, which I think is very messy, it's very clumsy and reckless, because here we can't rise on the death of anyone.
It later emerged that Botswana had successfully interdicted construction companies which have been awarded contracts to build over 1,000 housing units at the Lekwatemane local municipality in Bloemhof. In court papers, he argued that several companies awarded the projects did not qualify.
We will not be silenced by gunmen who want to loot the state.
Friends, business associates and politicians in the Northwest Province insist that Botswana's murder was a political hit. They, however, maintain that they'll stop at nothing to raise concerns regarding how state tenders are awarded in the province. At his funeral, several speakers told mourners that Botswana had told them that his life was in danger for the views he holds.
So I wanted to say to Solofelo and the kids, it is rare that you have a leader who is consistent, who stands up for the truth, who confronts issues. Because in that preparatory meeting in Freiburg, in Ruth Mombati's house, he said to me, I know I'm going to be killed. I said, Bozi, why then don't you desist?
2 weeks into his death, no arrests have been made. His business associates are offering 2 million rand to anybody with information that might lead to the successful arrest of his killers. Sello Tatai, SABC News, Mahikeng.
Well, that kind of wraps up our regional look. That report, of course, from Sello Tatai in Mahikeng a little bit earlier. We were in the capital talking about water restrictions there. But Kendall Mahamati is here to give us a final sports update before we wrap the show at the top of the hour. Kendall, what are you saying? It's go Bokke from Kevin Anderson?
Go Boks from Kevin Anderson. He reckons he's going to send his spirit through from Shanghai all the way to England.
Well, I say it's not good enough. Go Boks is simply not good enough, Elvis. You have to play for your country of birth in the Davis Cup. Then we talk about passion and love for your people. Go Boks is not going to cut it for me, unfortunately, Kendall. But you can do it with us after a short break.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Stand by. All systems ready. Three, two, one.
It is important for everyone to know food safety practices and make sure that their food is prepared safely from farm to the plate.
Who ensures that there's compliance?
In terms of all the abattoirs, they have to be registered. So when they are being registered, they are actually audited fully to make sure that the structural requirements as well as the hygiene requirements are met.
Most bacteria and viruses cannot withstand the normal cooking temperatures that we use to cook our food.
The bigger retailers cannot be seen as being insensitive to the food safety requirements.
There are many consumers that actually go shopping with a cooler box and ice packs so that they don't break the cold chain, because a few hours outside the temperature that it should be already shortens the shelf life of that product.
Join me on Health Talk every Saturday morning between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. as we unpack current health stories.
Good morning and welcome back. My name is Kendall Makamate and I've got your sports on Newsroom. Now, the match-fixing court case featuring former New Zealand cricketing captain Chris Cairns was back in session yesterday as former teammate Lou Vincent appeared to give his testimony.
Vincent, who has admitted that he was involved in match fixing, claims he was acting under direct orders from his captain, Cairns. The 36-year-old Vincent said his former leader and role model, Chris Cairns, convinced him to take part in fixing while they were both playing for the Chandigarh Lions in India. He described Cairns as the main player for the New Zealand national side when he started playing for them in around 2001. Cairns allegedly agreed to pay Vincent $50,000 per game to underperform. Vincent told the jury he did deliberately underperform in 4 games in 2008. In 2010, Cairns was accused by the chairman of the Indian Premier League, Lalit Modi, on Twitter of match fixing while he was playing for the Chandigarh Lions in the Indian Cricket League 2 years earlier. Among those that will be called to give evidence are former Australia captain Ricky Ponting, as well as New Zealanders Brendan McCullum and Daniel Vettori. The trial is expected to last over 6 weeks.
Now let's see what you've got to say on social media with regarding this New Zealand match-fixing scandal and the subsequent court case. Steve Blake reckons Chris Cairns appears to be on the way from behind wickets to behind the bars. Yes, my man, behind bars, jail, that's where you seem to be going right now. The sports girl you love seems to be commenting quite a lot today. When will match-fixing end in sports? Seems cricket has it bad. Match-fixing is not going to end in sports while business is in sports, I can tell you that. Fallon, cricket is one sport that's guaranteed dollars. And they're out there match-fixing rather. Come on, man, every other sport has to prove they can win first. That is true. Where they're dollars, where they're rands, where they're rubles, where they're rupees, there'll be match-fixing. Adnan's Siddiqui fresh match-fixing scandal associating a Kiwi great Chris Cairns and Lou Vincent. A platitudinal scam for this era of cricket. That's a big word there, sir. But yes, it's a huge scam. And Chris Cairns ordered me to fix matches. Dinesh Mongia, Daryl Tuffy also involved, claims Lou Vincent. So Lou Vincent, who's been banned for life in 2014 for match-fixing because he has admitted that he did match-fix, is now saying that Chris Cairns is the one who made him do it. And Bafana closed their 2-match Central American tour with a match against Honduras tonight. Kicking off at 6 p.m. local time, it will be 2 a.m. South African time and will feature 3 changes to the squad that beat Costa Rica by 1-0 last week. Bafana's international friendly with Honduras this week has had a change of time. And as I said, we'll begin 2 hours later on Wednesday morning. The 3 new faces that come in from the first 11 that faced Costa Rica are Jabulani Shongwe, Ayanda Patosi, and Kamohela Mkojo. They came in for Bongani Zungu, George Lebisi, as well as Busiso Bilakazi. The win in Costa Rica will have given the players a much-needed boost, and they will be gunning for a 3rd consecutive win this week in San Pedro Sula. Quick look at the full squad to face Honduras tonight. Goalkeeper Itumeleng Kuno is captain in the side. Defenders Anele Ngonga, Rivaldo Coutier, Eric Matoho, Mosa Lebusa. Midfielders Andile Jali, who scored the last goal, Kamohela Mkojo, Mandla Masango, Tulani Sirero, who's seemingly without a club right now, Jabulani Shongwe as well, and then the single forward Ayanda Patosi. You can also fall back and play an extra midfielder. Replacements, as you can see, are the usual Siabonga Nhlapo, Makubukwane, Ronwin Williams, Tulani Hlatshwayo, and Asibusiso Bilakazi falls out to the bench. Now in tennis news, South Africa's top-ranked singles player Kevin Anderson, who's risen 2 places to a career-high 10th in the latest ATP World Rankings, was playing a little earlier on, but we'll bring you that score in later bulletins. Now, meanwhile, the United States' John Isner and Spain's Feliciano Lopez are through to the 2nd round of the Shanghai Masters tournament after recording straight sets victories. Let's take a look.
13th seeded John Isner didn't even break into a sweat in the opening set against France Adrien Manarino, comfortably winning it 6-1. The big American was serving for the match 7 games later at 5-2, with Manarino offering no resistance. He won the next 4 points with the Frenchman not retaining any of his serves to win the match 6-1, 6-2. Feliciano Lopez and Andrei Kuznetsov's match was not such a lopsided affair, with a tiebreaker in the second set deciding the match. The Spaniard broke Kuznetsov once in the opener to take a 3-2 lead and went on to win the set 6-4. Lopez had an early break in the second set and raised to a 3-1 lead. But the 24-year-old Kuznetsov was able to break back in the 8th game to level the set at 4-all. The next 4 games went with serve, with the 15th seeded Lopez winning the tiebreak 7-3. Frenchman Jo-Wilfried Tsonga came from a set down to beat Spaniard Tommy Robredo 6-7, 6-2, 6-2. Leading 5-2 in the third set, Tsonga easily broke Robredo's service game to clinch victory. Pesing Katlu, SABC News.
Now, Kevin would have won his matches in 2 straight sets against wildcard Tommy Haas from Germany. And he had this to say while he was signing the camera to say goodbye and thank you. As Kevin Anderson won that match, and he gets to the point where he gives a little farewell message, but in it, it's good luck to the box to let them know that his thoughts are with them all the way from Shanghai in China all the way to England, where they play the next match, this against Wales. Have a look at this.
Yeah, no evidence, really.
Go box, there you go. Now, that's where we're going to leave it with the sport.
Go box.
Go box. Up next, the weather.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Let's start off by taking a look at what's going on in South Africa's eastern areas, because this is what everybody wants to know about. When is the heat wave going to end? Well, in Southern Africa's eastern interior, we are still expecting very, very hot temperatures to continue today. In fact, South African Weather Services have issued warnings for veld fires. We're currently experiencing veld fires in the Limpopo province, so it is a very dangerously hot and dry condition there at the moment. But good news, low pressure systems making their way towards the area. These are going to alleviate that pressure on the heat a little bit, and it will be gradual, but we are definitely going to see that temperature dropping very gradually as we move later into the week and towards the weekend. But as we take a look towards the rest of Southern Africa, seeing partly cloudy to mostly clear skies towards South Africa's western points. And as we move into tomorrow, that's due to continue partly cloudy skies will begin to yield isolated showers along South Africa's southern coastline. So as we take a look there, we're going to focus on the eastern regions again, because here is the good news. We're expecting a lot of rainfall to make its way towards South Africa's eastern interior here. This is the conjunction of 2 low pressure systems meeting in the area and both drawing in a lot of moisture towards that area. Of course, we're also expecting that to move towards the interior of Botswana as well. This will definitely do some good for the agricultural industry, and indeed both countries needing it. So let's take a look at what's going on in South Africa's temperatures. Pelopor peaks at 37 degrees. Temperatures in some parts of the Limpopo province rising to about 41 degrees today. It is going to be a very hot one. Pretoria dropping by about 1 degree from yesterday. It's at 36 degree maximum forecast for today. Along that southern coastline, much more pleasant temperatures, 22 degrees in East London, 22 in Port Elizabeth as well, and Cape Town peaking at about 16 degrees. Along that southern coastline of southern Namibia, we're expecting temperatures to range between 18 and 24 degrees. Wind speeds at about 30 kilometers per hour off the coastline of Oranienburg, with Karasburg peaking at 24. Temperatures only rising as we move further north, particularly in the interior, all the way up to 36 in Oshakati, with temperatures along that coastal region much cooler there. Nothing cool about the Botswanan weather for today. 39 degree maximums for Maun. We're expecting temperatures to reach no lower in your maximums than 35, and that is for Chabong. So you can definitely expect another hot one there. Let's just hope for that rainfall. There's only isolated showers forecast, but nevertheless, it will do a lot of good there. Victoria Falls at 38 degrees, temperatures peaking at 39, both Beitbridge and Kariba. Beitbridge, though, expecting an entirely clear day. It's going to be a scorcher of a day in Beitbridge there. So do remember to stay out of the sun if you can, stay indoors and keep yourself cool. Tete, even warm at 41 degree maximum temperatures. We're expecting a little bit of cloud cover in that area, though. Do expect some cloud cover to reach higher levels as we move towards Kwelemane, but moving further south, that dissipates entirely. It's going to be a beautifully sunny day, if not a bit of a hot one in Shai and Maputo, 38 degree maximums there. But possibility of a little bit of higher level cloud cover in those areas, just providing a bit of relief. Southern Madagascar experiencing 31 degree highs in the extreme southern regions. Their temperatures remaining in the 30s and higher 20s as we move further north as well, with a very small chance of rainfall extending through from Antsiranana towards Thomasina and again across the country over the capital of Antananarivo. Maximum of 29 degrees forecast for the capital there. and also expect 29-degree highs for both Moroni and Mamoudzou. Now the Comore is expecting a beautiful day here. The island regions continuing on warm temperatures there, 33 degrees in Victoria. Prolin expecting isolated to scattered showers. Now, this means that there might be a little bit of electricity in the air, and it might just rain pretty hard in that area as well. Score lines ahead of that means that we might just see some higher wind speeds ahead of that as well. This is where you can contact us with your feedback, weather at sabc.co.za. 011-714-5077 is our telephone number if you want to talk to us personally. And do remember, if you're in Limpopo and you have photographs of those fires, the hashtag is #LimpopoFires.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. That's a final update there from Phil with regards to the weather. Of course, we ask you a question of the day before we go. The team members put this out there. We're asking you, should there be a complete ban on public smoking? That was our question of the day. We've had quite a few responses on social media. Let's run through them and kind of get some opinion.
Well,
Slick says.
The first one here from Slick says maybe not a total ban, but designated smoking areas away from non-smokers at SABC Newsroom.
Then we've got Kolani Ngwekazi. He reckons it must be banned. If a person found guilty, pay a fine. Interesting, huh?
Keith says, aren't there designated smoking areas in public areas already? Might as well ban the sale of cigarettes totally.
And then Norman says, SABC Newsroom, I lean towards smoking being banned. Why should non-smoking people be subjected to second-hand smoking? Be considerate, says Norman.
Well, and this one says, yes, a passive smoker can also be affected, so says Tolani. Well, the question then, of course, remains, to smoke or not to smoke? That is your question for the day.
Yeah, I say, as long as you're not interfering with other people's life, your freedom of choice should never be encroached upon. That should be guaranteed. But that's where we leave it today, guys. It's been a good show. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. From myself, Elvis Preston.
And the rest of us.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao for now.